Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live today from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Ian is here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
So I think the yelling and screaming, although I don't think I did a lot of yelling and screaming yesterday, but I kind of feel like the yelling and screaming, that was kind of more reserved for Monday. And now we're here on Tuesday. And so I guess it's the goal as far as the Titans are concerned. Maybe we could be a little bit more constructive today, Ian. I think that'd be
I like that idea. Yeah.
So I want to start with this question, which is, now we know why the Titans are in the mess they're in. We spent all day yesterday talking about it. It's the owner. It starts at the very top, and the reason that you are where you are is because your owner has flown off the handle a couple of times and kind of changed everything. And so if you were working towards a plan or any progress, all of a sudden she rips that up and then they start over. I mean, again, to me, this traces all the way back to when she fired John Robinson. And again, it's not so much the firing of Robinson himself and what he was doing as much as it was the fact that she fired her general manager in first place when the team was 7-5, coming off of back-to-back division titles that, well, I'll just say you're really far away from 7-5 and back-to-back division titles and headed for a third. And, well, apparently that wasn't good enough then, but now 0-3, and the team can't win any games. It doesn't matter who the coach is, and it doesn't matter who the quarterback is and all of that. Again, ownership is culpable. And so we know that. And we know that there's no firing the owner. And so where do they go from here? So now that we've gotten to the bottom of this, now that we know that things cannot possibly get worse around here, you lost to Malik Willis on Sunday. Malik. Where do they go? I know what they'll say. The Titans will say, well, we just got to keep coaching it. We got to get better. We got to get ready for Miami. I know. That's what every coach says. That's what every team says. And that really is sometimes all a team or a coach, for instance, can do. And it's not as if I expect the Titans decision makers to hold any sort of press conferences or media availabilities or even Mike Keith interviews, because as we learned last year, they don't like to talk when things don't go well. They like to send the coach out there to be the one that has to put the fire out. We learned that last year. But where do they actually go from here? As opposed to just, we're going to keep coaching it and try to get a better result. Because this isn't just an 0-3 start. 0-3 starts are bad no matter who you are. But this isn't just an 0-3 start. I think this is an 0-3 start with no hope attached to it. You guys know the quarterback is no good right now. And the only saving grace for the young quarterback might be that, hey, did you see what Malik did on Sunday? Maybe the quarterback ain't the problem around here. But that's it. There's no hope of him playing better. I mean, again, we said, please just don't make any boneheaded mistakes. And now I'm like kind of torn between looking at a simple pick six that no quarterback should throw and saying, well, it wasn't as boneheaded as the other mistakes. That's not a good place to be. So what do? If you switch the quarterback, for instance, you probably have a better shot to win some games this season. But then the question has to be, well, how many games are you going to win this season if you switch the quarterback? 6? 7? But if you don't switch the quarterback, for instance, the Titans are going to get the same results, I would assume. He throws an interception every game. He's given the other team 14 points straight up himself. Again, you divide that by 3, that's, and let's add the field goal that they didn't kick against the Jets. So that's 17 points divided by 3. You're at, I think it's 5.5 points per game that he's just giving away. Well, so if you don't change the quarterback, then you're probably going to get the same results. The offensive line is horrendous outside of J.C. Latham. But again, the Titans are going to try to make a switch there where they go from Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a. PT to Jalen Duncan. And I don't think that's going to help matters at all. I think Jalen Duncan's actually worse than PT. The defense that at least people thought was good going into this game got completely exposed by Malik. And it's not as if where we sit today, and granted, Patrick Mahomes came from a quarterback draft class that quote unquote wasn't that good. But where we sit today, there is not an Andrew Luck or a Caleb Williams or a Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, there isn't kind of an elite quarterback prospect that at least we can sit around the campfire, endure these next 14 weeks and say, well, at least we know if the Titans are this bad, they can get that guy. Again, Joe Burrow kind of came out of nowhere as an NFL draft prospect. Jaden Daniels, and Ian, I don't know if you watched Jaden Daniels last night, but it looks like he's got some game. You know, he kind of came out of nowhere last year. Is great if you know who the young quarterbacks are out there to go get that are any good, that are excited to go. And I don't think Carson Beck's very good. I don't want anything to do with Shedeur Sanders. I think he is a problem child. I do. I think he is spoiled. And I think Dion has hurt his development as a leader. And I don't think he can walk into an NFL team and not bring the circus with him. So I'm out on Shedeur. And then Quinn Ewers always gets hurt. So I just, I'm concerned about what to do at quarterback there, big picture. The front office's vision, I don't buy, but I guess some of you did. It seems harder and harder to pretend that it's much of anything other than let's just go outside as many guys as we possibly can and then go out there and try to win some games. Because again, this armchair general manager spent the entire offseason complaining about right tackle, and that front office decided we don't need to do anything at right tackle. You're 3 weeks in, you have the worst offensive lineman in the league, and he happens to be your right tackle. So when I ask, so where do we go from here? That's a serious question. That's not me doing, I know all the time to ask questions like, for instance, Brian Callahan's terrible decision on Sunday to try to change his mind and go for it on fourth down and call the timeout. And if I were to look at it, I would say, what were you thinking? But I know the answer. The question I'm asking is just kind of rhetorical, and it's a way to kind of, as Dr. Phil would do, kind of put you down. How's that working out for you? What were you thinking? That kind of thing. But this is a real question because I don't have the answer. At least the answers I think they'll consider. Again, what I think the organization should do and what they'll consider are two totally different things. So again, I'm asking you, it's your team. Where do they go from here? Is it as simple as load up the wagon, boys. Let's get ready for Miami. Let's see if we can get them Dolphins this week. Or is it time to start talking about another management change, another front office restructuring, another firing in the middle of the season, another wait until the end? Is it time to start talking about that? And that might be the worst part about this, is that the Titans never really truly embraced a rebuild, whether that was Vrabel's fault or Rand's fault or Amy's fault or Jared's fault or whoever's. They never really did it. They just moved on from the players that won a lot of football games around here, like Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. We don't need them anymore. So you weren't a very good team. You got rid of the players that have won you games over the last 5 years, and now you're just stuck with an awful football team that, again, for the next 14 weeks, I'm not sure I really see a path to being good. And again, what I would do if I owned the team compared to what I think the person who does own the team would consider are two totally different things. Again, I said yesterday, she needs to stay out of football. She needs to leave the coaches alone. If the coaches want to switch a quarterback, she got to let them. The one thing I would just say is if I was the owner, like the one thing that would be off the table is trading away next year's first round pick. That is, you're not doing that without talking to me. But again, like if you want to change up the quarterback, change up the quarterback. If you want to do this, do it. And I'd hire an outside consultant to work for me, not to work for the Titans, but to work for me and to evaluate my program. I brought up Bill Belichick yesterday, and you guys were like, Bill Belichick. I'm like, let me tell you something. When Rand Carthon gets up there and says the ball doesn't bounce your way, if Rand Carthon says that to the owner, you think Bill Belichick's going to sit there and say, well, it does bring up a good point. The ball didn't bounce their way. Or do you think Bill's going to say, no, don't listen to that? But again, I do wonder where Amy's head is with all of this. Because again, everything the Titans are going to tell you, whether it's the coach or whether it's the president or the GM who don't do interviews this time of the year, but whatever the Titans are going to tell you is that we're sticking with the course, we're sticking with the plan, we're sticking with that's what they're going to say. But is that actually what they're going to do? Are they going to sit back there after they spent the money they spent this offseason with the optimism that they had? Ian and I did not have it. But again, that's why we have a popular show, because we say things that we think are true. You might not like it, but we'll say it anyways. And then it gets said, and then people get mad, and then it happens, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess these guys were right. But I can promise you, she was not thinking 4 or 5 wins going into the season like Ian and I were talking about. So is she just going to say, okay, this was part of our plan, we're going to stick with the plan, we're going to work through it? Or is she going to do something or drum up some ideas or, push the coach and the GM to get her answer? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Where do you go from here? Again, do we just get ready for the Dolphins on Monday night and see where it takes us? Or do you embrace tanking, and for the rest of the year, it's like, hey, let's see. I don't know. But I'm worried, because at least in the past, there was kind of okay, well, you can go to the young quarterback, or okay, well, you can go get a new coach, or okay, well, you can turn the season around, and now we're it's 3 games in, and you guys know what's up. 615-737-1025 is the phone number if you want to weigh in. 615-737-1025. And that's how we're starting today's show. Again, the question is, so what do you do now? Do you just accept it and just know this is going to be a long year, but you can't fire the coach and the general manager because they're only 1 year in the coach's case and 2 years in the GM's case and the president of football operations and the management structure and everything? Do you just suck it up and stink and then probably stink? I mean, what do you do? 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in. 615-737-1025. Now, I will say this. Yesterday, I felt pretty definitive in saying that you're the worst team in the NFL. Today, I don't feel as concrete in that opinion. But there's a difference between you and the other 2 teams that are 0-3. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Jacksonville, on the other hand, Lewis, I just want to know how this football team in late September is able to dig their heels in and stop what this is, because this is a mess right now. What do they do?
Yeah, this is their moment of truth. It was the moment of truth before this game. But now you know what you need? You need the football character to come to the top, to rise to the top. The football character in their best players. This is something that's held true ever since football's been being played. Your best players have to exhibit the most amount of character right now to say, we've had enough. Talent, I don't think, is the problem on this football team. They have some deficiencies that they're going to have to address in the offseason, but they have too many good players who are not able to lock in for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and even out their performances to where they don't have embarrassing moments like this.
That was Louis Riddick last night. Ian, how much of the Jacksonville-Buffalo game did you watch as part of the 2 football games going on?
I listened to some of it on the way home and then watched till about halftime. I guess when I got home and I saw the score, it was not close. So I switched to the other game.
I found zero interest in that game. Zero. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I must be a bad football fan. You know, Caroline always accuses me of being a college football hater. And I think that that's totally, totally false. But, I mean, I did not care about the Atlanta Eagle game last week. I knew it was on, and I was like, I just don't feel like putting it on. And then yesterday, I did watch the Washington-Cincy game, and that was a good game. I mean, they didn't punt the ball, but other than that, it was
entertaining.
It was one of those games that was almost kind of so crappy that it was legitimately entertaining. I watched Buffalo and Jacksonville for maybe all of about 3 minutes. By the way, I am feeling pretty good about the Stillman and Company preseason MVP, Josh Allen.
He looked good.
As far as that's concerned. But again, Jacksonville might actually suck as bad as you do. Now, I know they gave up 40-something points. Here's the hard part I have juggling with this. You're both 0-3, so records, it's a tie. Jacksonville has a better pedigree as far as who would you expect to be the better team. I think we could all say that we would expect Jacksonville. They've got an experienced coach who's won a Super Bowl. They got a quarterback who, while again, he's not the greatest quarterback in the world. I mean, I think we could agree going into the year, Trevor Lawrence was a legitimate starting NFL quarterback. And yet, that game wasn't even close yesterday. But then on one hand, I'm like, they went on the road and played Josh Allen. You got spanked by Malik Willis at home. So, just because you didn't give up 40 points, like if Josh Allen had been quarterbacking the Packers, you might have given up 50 points for whatever that's worth. So I said yesterday definitively that the Titans were the worst team in the NFL. And I felt certain of that. Now I've seen Jacksonville, and I'm like, okay, maybe there's 2. Let's take Cincy at 0-3 out of this discussion, because as far as where Cincinnati goes from here, I mean, again, I'm not farming their land and I don't cover the Bengals, but you keep rolling with it and see if Joe Burrow and those guys can improve and make the playoffs at 10-7 or at 9-8 and then get hot. That's kind of what I would assume Cincy would do going back to the drawing board. So take them out of it. We know who their quarterback is. We know what their core is. You know you can win with that core. So Cincy goes on. But then there's Jacksonville. They might be as bad as you. But when I ask the question of, okay, so where do you go from here? Where do they go from here? When I ask the question about where does Jacksonville go from here, to me, the answer is simple. They don't fire the coach. Like you pay the quarterback $275 million, and they paid the quarterback $275 million, and he doesn't work out, and it doesn't work out right away. The coach is the one who is getting the axe. And last year, after Jacksonville fell apart down the stretch, and they came in here and they got spanked by the Titans on Derrick Henry Day, I mean, he already gutted the entire defensive coaching staff. So what happens is you gut the coaching staff, you change the coordinators. In this case, they change defense. He runs the offense. But eventually they're going to, flip it around, and Peterson's going to call the plays. But again, worst case scenario for Jacksonville, and I think Jacksonville's probably not going to make the playoffs this year. But Jacksonville, their answer, they're changing the coach. And that may not be the answer, because Trevor Lawrence may not be the guy, and that might be the problem there. But again, at least like I know what direction Jacksonville can go in. I read today in the Jacksonville paper, apparently the owner was, according to a source close to the owner was angrier than he's ever been before because he thought he had a team that could compete for the Super Bowl and they're 0-3. I think the owner's mad because he paid $275 million and his quarterback looks like trash. But again, we know what the answer is going to be. They're going to fire the coach. By the way, I would not rule out Mike Vrabel to the Jacksonville Jaguars next year. And I'm not the biggest Trevor Lawrence fan in the world, so it kind of makes me think that Vrabel would have a capped ceiling if Trevor Lawrence was the quarterback. But if he could somehow convince Arthur Smith to leave the Steelers and go with him, ooh, baby. But here, you can't do what Jacksonville just fire the coach at the end of the year, midway through the year, whatever, and go about their business. You can't really do that here. Brian Callahan, at the end of the season, if things are horrifically bad again, I guess you could fire the coach. I mean, teams have fired the coach after 1 year. I mean, as much as people will say, you can't fire the coach after 1 year, the 49ers fired Jim Tomsula after 1 year, and they fired Chip Kelly after the next year and landed on Kyle Shanahan. So it's all possible. But I'm not sure that any of us would sit around and say that the reason the Titans suck so bad right now is because of the coach. I don't feel that way. They sucked before the coach, so they're probably stinking it up now, and it's probably not all the coach's fault. I mean, I guess you could switch up the personnel department, which, again, I am not enamored with when I hear the things that come out of there. But at the same time, I'm also not sure it's a good idea to switch it up for a third time in a 22-month period, right? Like the firing Robinson, the hiring Rand Carthon, the promoting Chad Brinker above Rand Carthon, essentially demoting Rand Carthon kind of thing. I mean, I'm not sure that's a good idea. So I keep going back to where do we go from here? Like Cincy, I know the answer. Load the wagon, boys. Let's see if we can win week 4. Jacksonville, they're going to fire the coach. Here, I don't know what they do. And for everyone that would just say, well, you know what, they just need to sell the team, Jared. They're not going to do that. So, again, I'm not advocating that they do that, but I also know they're not going to do that. So long story short, I mean, again, 3 weeks into the season, and I don't know where you go from here. Like, I don't know what the best course of action for the Titans is, or if there's any kind of fix other than what I think they're going to do, which is they just keep trotting Levis out there and see if it gets better. And you know as well as I do, it ain't getting better. When better is the pick 6 that he threw this week wasn't as bad as the pick 6 he threw last week. That is, I mean, come on. So, again, maybe this is what they need. Maybe we need one of those seasons from hell, which I thought 2 years ago was that, and then I thought last year might have been that too. But maybe this is what they need, because as painful as that 2015 Titan season was and as boring as it gets, it's probably better than last year's circus that has left you without Mike Vrabel and you're 0-3 and you don't know what you've got. I mean, and you know that you probably don't have a quarterback. I mean, it's not to say like last year was taking your lumps. You really didn't get anything out of that. So I don't know what you do. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Apparently, Brian Callahan did have a conversation with Amy Adams Strunk yesterday, because Brian Callahan says that he talks to her every Monday. And there is one thing that I really, really, really want to know. And we'll get to that next, and your phones, because we got a lot of them. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman and Company right here on 1025-1063. The Game. Let me tell all the fine folks out there that you can join me, Chris Sanders, and D. Mace live at Twin Peaks in Madison for Monday Night Football's edition of the award-winning pregame show from 4 to 6, which means Stillman and Company will be there at 2 o'clock. We'll break down the Titans' Week 4 matchup against the Dolphins. The award-winning pregame show is presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment, Sundeck Nashville, Sloan's Motorcycle ATV, and award-winning Blue Note Juke Joint and Blue Note Crossroads Bourbon.
Been on this field before, but haven't put up career numbers like you did today. What was the difference in this game and maybe just getting acclimated in these two starts with Green Bay?
More than anything, I think it's just a different opportunity. I only got 3 starts here as a rookie, and like I said before, I just wasn't ready at that point in time. And I've had a lot of time to just, work hard and just grind every day in order to make use of my next opportunity, which I've been just trying to do this last 2 weeks. And I think more than anything, you just try to continue to work hard and understand that you don't know when the opportunity will come, but you have to be ready for it if you get it.
There you go. That was Malik Willis after the game on Sunday, basically saying, hey, it's not about coming in here and getting revenge and taking care of the Titans. And it's, I've grown and learned and thankful for everything that happened here and on to the next. Well done, Malik. By the way, I would also like to say that Malik admits, they put me on the field before I was ready. Who was the one guy that was yelling and screaming in 2022 saying, look, he might be better than Logan Woodside. I don't know. It doesn't matter. They need a backup quarterback, and Malik needs the red shirt, period. He stinks right now. And said, no, Jared, he's the backup quarterback. And this is where I'm pretty disappointed in John Robinson and Mike Vrabel, because they should know better. You know, Rand and these guys, they've got no track record of success. They probably stink. And I think they probably, whatever, Brinker and Rand, and they don't know. But Robinson at least had built a solid team in the past, and they still let Malik be the backup quarterback. And I'm like, what? I couldn't believe it. I'll never forget Kaharski told me that as a rookie, Malik was ahead of Vince Young. Now, Vince Young went to the Pro Bowl and was the offensive rookie of the year. So that's kind of expert Paul is. But again, I knew better. My eyes told me better, just like my eyes told me better in training camp about PT and Skoronski, even though everybody was telling me, including the coach, they were having great camps. But that's a different discussion. What I really want to know is most importantly, what Brian Callahan said to Amy yesterday about how Malik came in here and did what he did. Because Amy's like the rest of us. Again, Amy wants to be apprised of what's going on. In fact, she probably wants to be apprised a little too much. She probably got a little too much of her hands in the cookie jar, which I don't like. But there's no doubt that they talked to her before they traded Malik to the Green Bay Packers for a bag of footballs. So they talked to her and said, hey, Malik's made progress, but we want to trade him for a 7th-round draft choice. Because, again, you can slice it however you want. When you give somebody who's already got, cheap rookie money and you give them away for a 7th-round pick, there's no real way to slice that other than we don't think he's very good. So 3 weeks ago, you told me he wasn't very good. He came in here and he looked like Michael Vick on Sunday. Please explain how that happened. And again, Brian Callahan can shrug it off with the media and say things like, well, I always knew Malik was a capable quarterback. Really? Because 3 weeks ago, you told me he wasn't when you said, Miss Amy, we need to trade for a 7th-round draft choice. So, again, not to say that I think that, Amy probably went off on him or Amy didn't buy what he had to say or whatever. I have no idea how she would have reacted to that. But what I want to know is what he had to say, because there's no doubt in my mind it came up. That's why I said on the show last week, I said, if I'm a Titans brass member, like Brinker or Carthon or Callahan, I'd rather face Jordan Love. Because even though I should beat Malik and I shouldn't beat Jordan Love, I'd rather play Jordan Love, because if I lose to Jordan Love, then at least it's not like a end of the world. Oh my God, we literally went to the owner 3 weeks ago, said this guy is terrible. We want to give him away for a bag of footballs. And she said, okay. And we did. And now he came in here and beat us and embarrassed us at home. You don't get that if you lose to Jordan Love. You got that when you lost to Malik. So I want to know what Brian Callahan had to say to her. He'll never tell you, but I want to know. I would love to know tomorrow when Callahan meets with the media. Brian, you said that you and Amy talk on Monday afternoons. Did Amy ask you how you guys could have greenlit trading away Malik only to have him come in here and look like the love child of Lamar Jackson and Randall Cunningham? And how did she take that news? Because I can't imagine she took it very well. 615-737-1025. And our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunting.com. 615-737-1025. Kyle is going to kick us off today. Our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHunting.com. Kyle, go ahead.
Hey, Jared. The state of the franchise is in a big rut right now, man, because we don't know if we have a quarterback. We know we don't have an offensive line. Here's what I would do. I would ride the season out with Will. And if he gets hurt, we're still going to lose either way. Rudolph ain't getting us any victories. And I don't see us drafting a quarterback in the top 10 because I'm like you. I don't like Shador Sanders. I don't like Beck. And I don't think Quentin Ewers is going to be a good pro. So I just want to get your feeling and have a conversation with you right here about what would you do?
Well, I mean, it's really hard for me to judge that. I mean, Kyle, thank you for your call. Somebody texted in and asked something similar, which was, something along the lines of, I heard a show earlier on the station talking about drafting a right tackle in the first round and then getting a quarterback later or riding it out with Levis or something like that. And I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. Drafting a right tackle in the first round? I thought a right tackle in the first round?
Once again.
I thought that right tackle didn't matter. That's what everybody told me. I mean, everybody told me, including the coach.
Well, they tried with Isaiah Wilson. That didn't work, though.
I know, but again, everybody told me right tackle didn't matter. I mean, everybody whose opinion isn't on the wall, fame at the Titans, told me that.
Well,
the one guy who did, but that's a little different.
Faith in PT.
Oh, yeah, great. So now we're talking about right tackles in the first round? You see how verkakta this is? Again, it was all year. We don't need any resources on right tackle, Jared. And now it's let's forgo quarterback so we can get right tackle figured out first. The answer to all of these draft questions are, I don't know. And honestly, they don't know. The college season is not over. I don't know how we're supposed to sit here and tell you what it's going to look like when the board's not up. I saw the top corner in the country tore his ACL last week. There's still a lot of college ball to be played. So when I hear these things what should we draft this year, Jared? I'm I remember the last time we started talking about who to draft in October. We were having the discussions about, do you want to draft another Oregon quarterback in Justin Herbert? Because the last time you drafted an Oregon quarterback, it didn't work. And then your team ended up in the AFC Championship game that year. Not to say this team's doing that, but it's too early for the draft talk unless there's a great slam dunk 1-1 quarterback. And then I think if somebody starts to emerge this year, the way Jaden Daniels emerged last year, the way Joe Burrow emerged, I hate to say it, it's the way Kenny Pickett or Mac Jones emerged their last years in college, then we can start talking about it. But right now, to me, there's not a slam dunk 1-1 guy. Let's go to Michael, who's up next here on the program. Michael, thank you for calling and thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Man, I'm trying to figure out where exactly rock bottom is for the offensive line specifically. Because from 2022 to last year, I said a lot of people were saying to themselves, well, it can't get worse than this. And then we all saw that it absolutely got worse than it was 2 years ago. Now we're on pace to be even worse than last year. And I was saying to myself, I'm not going to say that it can't get worse because we learned that it absolutely can.
I don't know how it can get worse. And Michael, I'm going to let you go because your phone's driving me crazy. But it absolutely can get – it can't get worse than losing at home to Malik Willis. You're 0-3. So, what's the difference between 0-3 and 0-4? What's the difference between 0-3 and 0-8? Other than just the sheer volume, you're at least tied for the worst team in the NFL right now. You just got beat at home by a guy that you gave away for nothing 3 weeks ago. Your young quarterback stinks. Your offensive line stinks. Your first-round pick last year is clearly a bust. I don't know how it can get worse. And not only that, all the cards that these rebuilding teams play, you've already played. You fired your coach. You fired your general manager. Granted, I think you got worse definitely in the front office, and I think you might have gotten worse at coach. I don't know. We'll see. Jury's out on Brian Callahan. But you've already played those cards. I don't think it can get worse than what we saw on Sunday. Again, the sheer volume of losing can be worse, but the sheer embarrassment and the knowledge. Because again, at 0-1, you guys said it's only one game, and if this hadn't happened, and if this punt, and then we would have won, and last week you could say, but Jared, our defense is legit, and if we can just not do the boneheaded stuff, and now it's kind of well, we are, and we're not very good. And there's no way around it because, again, it was Malik. It was Malik who came in here. 615-737-1025. More of your phone, 737-1025 here on our program. Let's talk Window Nation. I absolutely love Window Nation. Window Nation is who I trust. I had Window Nation at my home, and I said, hey, do I need to get new windows? And Window Nation looked at me, and they said, no, you don't need to get new windows. Your windows are solid. And that gave me all the faith I needed that when I tell you to use Window Nation and you do, they're going to give you an honest estimation of your home. Not just are they going to take great care of you with the price, because for every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 windows free. And there's no money down, no payments, no interest for 24 months. But I know that, again, they're going to be looking out for your best interest. I know it because I've experienced it. And I don't know about the other window companies if they do the same or not, but I do know Window Nation. And I know that that's what Window Nation does. So give them a call, 866-90Nation, or visit windownation.com. Again, for every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 windows free. And September's the time to do it because it's not smoking hot outside anymore. It's not freezing cold. So get those windows, get it taken care of in the fall. Every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 free, plus 0 down, 0 payments, and no interest for 24 months. Schedule a free in-home estimate by calling 866-90Nation or visiting windownation.com.
It's a tough time. I didn't been around it, so I mean, me coming in, I didn't feel any type of stress or doubt that we still can't get the job done. Because if you look in the conference, you got 2 wins with Texans and Colts got a 1 win, and I mean it's still winnable. You know, we're not in week 10, week 11, 12. You know, where it's time to put it's time. Like you got to go. You know, like all of us, no guy has played a perfect game. You know, the offense hasn't played perfect yet. And once we start to get that feel and just have that confidence, man, I don't really know what it is yet. That's why we got to continue to watch the tape and get better every day. But we have a legit team. Like this is a Super Bowl caliber team on paper. But at the end of the day, we got to go out there and prove that.
A Super Bowl caliber team. Ian, we may have to give Tyler Boyd the right tackle story, because I can hear on one hand, hey, we got a Super Bowl team on paper.
PT's not Super Bowl caliber right tackle?
Right now, PT is the worst pass protector in the NFL. So according to Pro Football Focus, I don't care about the pass blocking grade as much as I care about the efficiency. So, like of your snaps, what percentage of the time do you allow a pressure? Do you allow a sack? Do you allow and efficiency? Ian, you will never guess who is the single worst pass protector at 92% efficient in the National Football League, according to Pro Football Focus.
Who we got?
Nicholas Petit Ferrer, a.k.a.
PT.
PT is number one. Cam Robinson in Jacksonville is number two at 92.5. Peter Skoronski, by the way, is 15th at 94.4, which is really bad when you're a guard and you can't pass block. Skoronski is 15th. I believe Radence is next up at 37, but you're at 96.2, which isn't the end of the world there. And so, again, Cushenberry, I guess, is doing okay. And Latham's a bright spot. There's no doubt about that as far as I'm concerned. Freddie is in Franklin and is up next here on our program. Freddie, thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Jared, you're not wrong often, my friend, but I'm afraid you were wrong yesterday when you said this team is at rock bottom. And the last two callers kind of hinted to it. But if you look at this team on offense and defense, where are the good young players? There are none. Is there one player on the Titans that another team would say, boy, we sure would love to have him? There's no depth. There's no skill players. This is not the rock bottom. That the Titans have a long way to go down.
So if you're telling me they have no good young players, and again, I will counter with you and I will say that McCreary is a good young player. Now, granted, he's not a great young player, but he's a good young player. But again, my point is you're saying that we have a lot further to go as far as rock bottom, but you're telling me there's no good young players now. So wouldn't that tell us that you're at rock bottom?
Well, what are you building on?
So your whole point is
who are your building blocks of this team for the future?
Right.
Are you looking to draft them?
My point, Freddie, is that you don't have them, and that's why it's as bad as it can get. There's no hope.
It's going to get much, much worse.
And by the way, Latham, I would add Latham and Sweat. I think both of those guys other teams would want. Freddie, thank you for your call.
Where's your skill guy?
I don't understand. I don't understand, Freddie, thank you. I don't understand this whole it can get so much worse. It can get worse than just being straight embarrassed at home by a guy you got rid of 3 weeks ago.
How's Monday Night Football primetime look for you?
Nobody's going to watch that game.
Okay.
Now, one person in America.
What if
the
they lose
Lions
to Tyler
and
Huntley
the
on Monday
Seahawks
Night
are
Football?
playing at the same time? You think people across the country are going to tune in to watch Skylar Thompson maybe versus Will Levis, as opposed to watching the Lions, who were in the NFC title game, and the Seahawks, who I think are okay, I don't know, I haven't watched them. I know they're better than the Titans because I watched them scrimmage.
I mean, the other game will have more eyeballs, sure.
No one's going to watch this game. Nobody watched the game at Miami last year because it was part of a split doubleheader, and the entire country, instead of watching Will Levis's comeback, which a caller called in maybe after week one or maybe even after week two, I can't remember, and said something along the lines of, Jared, do you now regret the Miami loss because if they had the Miami win, because if they had lost at Miami, then the Titans would have been able to pick Joe Alt. And, who knows if they still believe in Levis or if they would have gone and looked for a quarterback or whatever. And I still believe in my heart that at the time it was the right thing, but I'm starting to change a little bit. I'm starting to believe it wasn't a good idea to win that game. But again, I don't, just because you're 0-6 as opposed to 0-3 doesn't mean it's any worse. This is as bad as it gets. Period. It's as bad as it gets. You're terrible. You've been terrible. You fired people hoping that the people that you fired were the reason that you were terrible. You're worse than you were when you had the people you fired. And you just lost at home in embarrassing fashion to Malik. It does not get worse than that. Kinston is up next here on our program. Thank you for calling and thank you for waiting. Kinston, go ahead.
What's going on, Jared? Question yesterday. I want to ask about your comment yesterday where you talked about for sure the GM being the greatest GM that we've ever had and how they moved off of him to try to get better. And look where that left us for a period of about 5 to 6, 7 years. Sure. Eager to know what you would think his opinion would be as a radio host about this whole fiasco, because everything you just said is 100%. Eager to hear what you think his approach would be as a GM to get us out of this hole. All right, Jared, thanks. Bye.
Yeah, Kinston, I got to tell you, I would love to opine on that. I really would, because like, I mean, my dad and I talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And I was like, you know, I think I was talking to Derek and Chris about this off the air at the pregame show the other day. And I was like, could you imagine how crazy Floyd would have gone with those Levis turnovers, or how crazy Floyd would be going about the special team stuff? I mean, he would have been going when
the second
Levis
blocked punt. Oh man, he would have blown a gasket.
He would have blown a gasket on Simmons' penalty the other day too. You know,
I guess he would have been mad at the ref for one, but he on the punt block. Oh boy.
I mean, he would have gone nuts on the punt block. I mean, I could hear him in my head when Levis threw that pick at Chicago, the death pick, and I could hear him as, Pee-wee kids know not to throw that ball. You know, he would have gone crazy about that. As far as the state the Titans are in right now, I just don't think it's fair to comment on that and say what he would say, because I don't know what he would say. You know, the amount of times that we worked together that we'd sit down and we'd say, you know, I'd say like, Floyd, what'd you think of this? And he said something and I was like, I was not expecting that response from you. You know, the amount of times over the years that happened, you know, it was probably more often than the other way around, where I knew he was going to say something. And so I guess I don't feel comfortable telling you what he would have thought. I think I feel confident enough to tell you that he would have been very, very upset about Amy firing John in the middle of the season. And not because he and John were friends, but because I think he thinks that those kind of things really hurt organizations. And considering what's happened since they've done that, it's hard to argue that was the right decision when it happened. But I don't want to put words into his mouth of what he would have said, because deep down inside, I don't know. I'll put it to you like this, though. I would love to know. And that's kind of been, you know, the last year of my life, or however long it's been, Ian, I'd say probably about a year. You know, the last year of my life, the amount of times I've been like, man, I wonder what Floyd would have to say about this. But you got to keep in mind, like, I found out, you know, in May that we were having a kid, and it was like, man, I'd love to know what Floyd would have to say about this kind of stuff. And to not know what Floyd would say, it kind of sucks. But I don't want to sit there and say he would say this or he would say that when I'm not sure what he would say. 615-737-1025. I can promise you this. He wouldn't be happy. And he wouldn't have pushed back on me all summer about right tackle the way that you guys did. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. Brian Callahan has been harping on what the biggest problem with the football team is. And yet, is there a way to fix it? And is he going to actually do what it takes to fix? We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So again, the theme of today's show is where do we go from here? Where do the Titans, 3 weeks into the season, you know the team stinks. The question is, are you the 31st team in the league or are you the 32nd team in the league with Jacksonville? And I would lean towards 32nd, but you could make an argument after Jacksonville's performance yesterday that they may just be 31st. But Brian Callahan keeps talking about what to do to fix the team. And Brian Callahan said yesterday at the start of his press conference, it was about the turnovers. That, hey, we're not getting any turnovers and we're turning the ball over too much. Then he went on the coach's show. And yesterday he detailed on the Titans podcast, he detailed those turnovers and how bad they're hurting the ball club, which, first of all, before we play this cut, Ian, can't we say when it comes to the turnovers, no duh?
Probably, yeah.
So here was Brian Callahan's breakdown of the turnovers.
I don't think we took a step back. I think that, they hit a couple of plays and we continue to give the ball away at a rate that's not sustainable, and put ourselves in a really tough spot. And that's ultimately where the NFL games are won and lost. We need to do a better job of taking care of the football and trying to get it back, is really the biggest reason that we've lost. And we put a stat up today that of our turnovers, and, I think 7 turnovers and 2 block punts. So it's ultimately 9. We're -9 right now. If you count the block punts, they don't count officially as a turnover, but in my mind they do. And we've given up 14 points off interceptions, 7 points off of a block punt, and then 2 fumbles in plus territory that led directly to field goals. So that's 6 more points. And I think we ended up with our point differential being at 30 points. We lost by 7 twice, and we lost by 16. And then we've also given up 30 points on turnovers. And so when you look at
30 points,
there's
yeah.
That's it. And that's encouraging and discouraging all at the same time.
Okay. He just detailed. We lose the game because we turned the ball over too much. I would agree. Here's the problem. What are you going to do about it? Who's the culprit when it comes to the turnovers? Because, well, what he's saying, hey, turnovers and the block punts, that's 9 because it's 7 turnovers. I think Will Levis has 8 turnovers himself. There's 2 block punts. And I would consider Jeffrey Simmons' penalty last week to be a turnover. I mean, that to me is a turnover. You're getting the ball back. They got 0 points. You committed a penalty. They scored 7 points. To me, that's a turnover. But again, who's really committing the turnovers? The one guy. You can look at the turnovers and say, yeah, we've turned it over X amount of times, but turnovers are a team stat. Except the problem is there's one guy who's turning it over around here. So the turnovers are really a Will Levis stat. And I went down and took Will Levis's turnovers and put them individually. He turned the ball over 3 times in week 1. One was absolutely his fault, the flick death pick. Then there was the blindside sack where he fumbled the ball. Can't say that's his fault. And then there was the interception he threw at the end of the game, which interceptions at the end of the game, I don't exactly know how you feel about him. It was a 4th down throw. Maybe he could have done better. I don't know. Let's put that one off to the side. So one was his fault. One wasn't. One was iffy. Against the Jets, he turned it over twice. One was absolutely his fault. He rolled the ball on the ground so the Jets could get it. The second one, was the throw to Trayon Burks, which Brian Callahan says wasn't his fault. But, again, shouldn't the ball have been out in front of Burks instead of behind Burks? Whatever. Again, put that one to the side. So now in 2 games, we've got 2 faults that are 2 turnovers that are unequivocally his fault. And then he turned it over 3 times on Sunday. The pick 6, which was his fault. Sorry, Brian Callahan, but I'm not buying the whole Jair Alexander's really good. So they made a good play, not we made a bad play. Sorry, that's his fault. The fumble, which was on PT, and then, again, another interception at the end of the game. So that's 8 turnovers. 3 are definitively his fault. 2 were not his fault. The strip sack and then the sack last week, that was PT's fault. And then one was iffy, the Burks throw, and then 2 were at the end of the game. So even if we're being nice, that's 3 turnovers in 3 games. 14 points. And then 3 points you didn't get out of the field goals, that's 17 points. I mean, if you want to win games in the NFL, and I'm not talking about winning big picture, because I'm talking about just winning the individual games, because the way Brian Callahan makes it sound like is we really care about trying to win this next upcoming game. If you want to win games in the NFL, you can't give the other team 6 points a game. And that's what Will Levis is doing. He himself, he's giving the other team 6 points. Interception at Chicago, 7. Interception against Green Bay, 14. Rolling the ball on the ground against the Jets, 3. That's 17. Divided by 3 is 5.6. That's 6 points a game. So when Brian Callahan gets up there and he starts talking about, we have got to stop turning the ball over. The reason we're losing the game is because we're turning the ball over. We've got to stop doing it. And then gets asked, so are you going to make a change at quarterback? No. Well, now at this point, I don't have any sympathy for you. Like at this point, this is what you've created for yourself. Like now it's, I don't know what to say. Like, again, either you're coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And so when it comes to Brian Callahan, like I would love to know what happens when he gets up in front of the team. And Derek has talked about this a lot. You know, he brought this up on the pregame show on Sunday. And he was talking about the idea that if Brian Callahan doesn't make a change at quarterback and Will Levis keeps turning the ball over, that eventually Brian Callahan's going to lose his team. And I do wonder if when Brian Callahan gets up in front of the team and he starts going over the fact that, guys, we're turning the ball over too much. And look, they're not getting turnovers, which is a huge red flag. And again, we're going to have a talk later today about the defense. But when he keeps saying the problem with our team right now is that we keep turning it over, well, at some point, somebody in that room is going to raise their hand and say, Coach, the guy who keeps turning the ball over is the one guy that you say under no circumstances you're going to sit. I mean, to me, either you're coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. Now, the reason that I'm not yelling and screaming about benching Will Levis is because I'm not sure what making the change would benefit the Titans in the long term. In the short term, I think the Titans are much better off with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. Because again, while I think Mason Rudolph has his limitations, Mason Rudolph is not giving up 6 points a game to the other team. But again, if you make the switch to Rudolph, you might win next week against the Dolphins. You might win some other games on the schedule, Jacksonville, and I'm trying to think who else they play that stinks. You might win a couple more. You might win 6-7 games, something like that. We keep saying 6 or 7 games, and they keep playing more games, so then it should probably go down. But I'm not sure, again, that benefits the team in the long run. Some of these coaches don't care. Like, I'm not sure exactly how it benefits Carolina in the long run to win games with Andy Dalton, but I think that they're so sad of losing games with Bryce Young that they're like, well, just let's do something different. And I get it. I don't like to lose either. The only time I've ever openly enjoyed tanking was the last game of the 2015 season when the Titans were on the verge of the number 1 pick and they got beat by Josh Freeman in Indianapolis, who had signed that week. That's the only time that I've ever been like, please lose, Titans. And they got the number 1 pick, and that turned into Derrick Henry and Jack Conklin and Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith. And I think that trade worked out pretty well. But again, the point I'm making here is when it comes to Brian Callahan, it almost feels at this point dishonest for him to sit there and harp on the turnovers when, again, we know the problem with the turnovers. We know the guy who's committing the turnovers. It's the quarterback. And I'm going to say this about the offensive line because a lot of people, and the offensive line stinks, but a lot of people will just say, well, nobody could play with an offensive line like that. Yes and no. The worst thing in the world for an offensive line that can't pass block is to be put in a situation where they have to throw the ball the entire game. And at 10-7, the Titans didn't have to throw the ball the entire game. At 17-7, you do. And so now more guys have to go out into the pattern, and then less guys can stay in to help protect, and you can't really use play action. And your offensive line, look, they stink, but you're not doing them any favors when you throw the ball right to the other team. So again, I said this last week when Will Levis rolled the ball on the ground against the Jets, and Brian Callahan said it's inexcusable and it's unacceptable. And I said, okay, well, so what are you going to do about it? Because if you just say, hey, Will, don't do that, and send him back out there, you kind of are accepting it. When Jeffrey Simmons gets a penalty and you say that can't happen, but then blame the refs, well, whose fault was it? Was it Simmons or was it the refs? It can't be both. But when you get up there and you say, we're turning it over too much, guys, and it's like, yes, Johnny in the front row. No, he's turning it over too much because he's the one that threw the ball to Jair Alexander. I didn't throw the ball to Jair Alexander. Tony Pollard didn't throw the ball to Jair Alexander. DeAndre Hopkins didn't flick it to the Chicago Bears. Tajay Spears didn't roll the ball on the ground. Don't get mad at us. Get mad at him. And then every time he's out, oh, no, Will's doing great. Okay. So, I mean, again, Brian Callahan can complain all he wants. That's great. But the guy who's causing the turnovers is the guy who you will not do anything about other than, well, we're just going to try to keep coaching it. Okay. Good luck. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. And I'm not arguing for them to bench Levis. But I would say this. If you want to win on Monday night, then your best bet is to not play Will Levis. If you're fine with tanking the season, then go ahead, by all means. But when Levis tells you who he is, and he keeps telling you who he is, don't act like it's going to change. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. The best argument I can make for Will Levis has almost nothing to do with Will Levis. I'll explain. We'll get to that coming up next. And then we're right to your phones at 615-737-1025. Let's talk about White Bison. That's right. It is coffee season. It is fall. It is pumpkin season. And White Bison knows what you're craving this time of the year. Pumpkin. So try their pumpkin cookie frappe, their pumpkin spice latte, or the vanilla shaken espresso with pumpkin soft whip. They're irresistible. Plus, White Bison Rewards members can get your 8th drink free. And while you're there, check out their sandwiches and wraps, all freshly prepared right when you order. And for a sweet tooth, try their fresh baked pastries. They go perfectly with premium coffee, expertly prepared by the Roastmasters at White Bison. I'm a big White Bison twice daily guy. White Bison, finely crafted for your everyday.
Rough start the first couple of weeks for Levis as he goes to the air. It's intercepted. Jair Alexander high stepping for 6.
And we have that. Now, this is going to be interesting because it's not him trying to do too much. He's not scrambling. He's not going to the ground, making a crazy flip and trying to create something out of nothing, which always makes the play worse. This is just not seeing the defender sitting on a hitch route. I mean, you can't let that one go. You're staring right at DeAndre Hopkins. That's why Jair Alexander is jumping that route.
35-yard intercept return for Alexander. Already the 6th pick of the year for this Packer defense. They had 7 all last season.
That was the pick 6 Will Levis threw. And by the way, Kurt Warner has a breakdown. I was watching it during the break where Kurt Warner's basically like, yeah, Jair Alexander's just playing inside leverage because with this split that the Titans have run, he knows that the ball's coming inside and has no worry that the wide receiver is going to run deep. And then Moose Johnson right there saying he's sitting on it right there. Levis has got to turn and look before he throws the ball to see Jair Alexander with inside leverage. You know, this is going to sound crazy, but these are the kind of reads that people make ahead of time. And guys, when you see them, you know, with the hands at the line of scrimmage, it's like, oh, he's playing inside leverage. Okay, how about a little pump fake inside? Go. You know, that's where you run a little sluggo, boom, right up the corner. But that might be, I guess, too much to ask for. So I think the best argument in defense of Will Levis, and for me, I'm not calling for Will Levis's benching because I don't see the upside with Mason Rudolph. Even though he's right now, I trust Mason Rudolph not to give the other team 6 points, which you can't do with Levis. I just don't see the upside in putting Rudolph out there and winning with Rudolph. You know, the games probably you should win, like Monday night, and then losing the games against good teams and then coming away from it and saying, well, you know, we went 6-11 this year and are picking 9th in the draft. Like, I don't really see the upside in that. So, but I don't give a rat's ass if you want to keep running Levis out there. That's on you. But the strongest argument that I would have for Will Levis is this. Did you see what Malik looked like when he wasn't on the Titans? If Malik Willis can go from what Malik Willis looked like on the Titans to the Malik Willis that we saw on Sunday, which again, to me, Malik made, you know, probably about 3 really impressive plays. You know, a 3rd and 14, I remember they hit, and a 3rd and 17 they hit, and he had a couple of runs that looked, I mean, it looks almost natural for him to take off with the ball. But other than that, you know, a lot of it was pretty simple stuff or just, hey, I'm throwing the ball up one-on-one with McCreary and Christian Watkins, and I'm just going to put it up there and see what happens. And Watkins comes down with the ball because Watkins is taller than 6 feet and McCreary short and has short arms. But again, if Malik can go to a real organization, and I said this on Friday and I stand by it, I have franchise envy for the Packers, which, by the way, this goes back to how crazy your ownership is. You'll never be the Packers because the Packers last year, I believe, were either 2-5 or 3-5. And they didn't fire the general manager because the general manager said, hey, I want to see if Jordan Love can do it. And let's give up on Aaron Rodgers. And everybody said, okay, we believe, let's go ahead and do it. Whereas your general man or your owner hauled off and fired the general manager at 7-5. But I digress. But if Malik can go to a real organization and can look like that, well, I know Levis is better than Malik. So what does that mean? Like, what does that mean Levis would look like if he went to a real team where the general manager was more focused on football than, I don't know, selling Taylor Swift tickets or something? I don't know. You know, what would that look like if that were to be the case, if Levis were to go there? Again, the best argument, in my opinion, for Levis, the 2 arguments for Levis of why you wouldn't make a quarterback switch, the first is because, well, we'd win too much if we put the other guy in, which is so depressing. And then the second one is, hey, you saw what Malik looked good, what Malik did when Malik was out there. So if Malik can look like that with a real team, maybe Levis could look like that or look better with a real team. Somebody just put into the YouTube chat, where are the great players that J-Rob drafted? Hey, YouTuber, did you see the Cowboy game that came on after the Titans game? Because J-Rob drafted a running back who played in that Cowboys-Ravens game. I think he's pretty good. All right, let's go to your phones as promised. 615-737-1025. Let's go to Jonathan, who's been holding here and is up next. Our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Jonathan, go ahead.
Hey, Jared. Enjoyed the show.
Thank you.
Was just listening to you about, what the coach is saying about Will. And the thing is I kind of like think about what happened with Bryce Young, is that the coach isn't going to say anything to take away a player's confidence until he pulls the rug out. So I think that's why you're hearing him say it. They know why we're losing games, and it's because of Levis. We would at least be 2-1 with Rudolph. And that's where I disagree with you, is that since I know that we would be 2-1 at the least with Rudolph, probably 2-1, we'd lose the Packers game. But you are going to lose the locker room, like you were talking about, if he keeps making these mistakes. And he's not processing the field. You put him into a play action offense, one read, he's going to be pretty good at that. But that's not the same offense that we're running now. He's actually got to make the reads over the middle of the field, and he's not processing. And I think he's just going to keep losing confidence. So I don't think the coach is going to say anything. I think he's going to get through Miami. And if we lose to a backup in Miami, you absolutely have to bench him, regardless of what the draft position is, because you're going to lose that locker room. So that was just what I was thinking about.
Yeah, no, Jonathan, I hear you. Again, if you lose to Miami, and I don't even know who's going to quarterback Miami. If you lose to Miami and go into the bye, it's going to be a long 2 weeks around here. It's going to be a long 2 weeks. I mean, I think they're going to beat Miami, but I thought they were going to beat the Jets, and I thought they were going to beat the Packers. So what the hell do I know? Let's go to Josh, who's up next here on our program. Josh, thank you for calling, and thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Jared, I need to ask you a question first. How often is it that somebody apologizes to you and says, you know what, Jared, you were right, I was wrong?
I'd say like 1 out of every 500 you're an idiots I get probably would be the ratio there.
Well, let me be that 1 out of 500. Jared, you were right, I was wrong. I apologize. I was, I defended Amy Adams-Strunk, and I like her personally. She's a likable person, I think. But objectively, we stink, Jared. We stink. And it's from an organizational perspective. I read something within the last few days, and I want to know if you can corroborate this. I read that Amy Adams-Strunk kind of put her finger on the scale to draft Will Levis. Is that accurate?
So Charles Robinson at Yahoo Sports has reported that it was an ownership-driven pick, and that apparently there were people on the coaching staff. I want to make sure I have this correct, that were in favor of drafting another player to help that team win in 2023 when they decided to draft the quarterback. For what that's
worth. I just wholeheartedly that was a punch in the stomach as a fan. I mean, Amy Adams-Strunk, I love you, but stay in your lane. Let the football people make the football decisions. That was what her dad was just so terrible about doing, was just interjecting, and his decisions weren't great. The reason why Jerry Jones is the worst general manager around. Let the football people make the football decisions.
So here's what I'm going to offer up, and I'm going to do this with the I appreciate your call, Josh. I'm going to do this with the disclaimer on the front end that I'm not sure that she hadn't done that. I'm not going to say that she for sure, that I know that she for sure did this on the front end, or she for sure didn't do it on the front end, or I don't know. But I think what Amy Adams-Strunk should have done, instead of firing Robinson and firing Vrabel, again, hindsight's 20/20, but I was against firing Robinson, so I feel like I'm at least owed that. I think there should have been some hard discussions, some really hard ones, about making changes and about, hey, I want you to start running these things by me. I remember that when Rand came in, one of the things that I heard, and I can't exactly remember if I heard it from an on-the-record thing or just from talking behind the scenes, was that, J-Rob kind of ran the team, and, he talked to Amy, but he didn't make her aware of everything all the time. Well, then you need to have a conversation with John Robinson. You need to tell John Robinson, this is what I expect of you. Again, maybe that happened. And if they're not going to do what you tell them to do, then you have to fire them. Got it. But I wonder how much of it was hey, John, I like what you've done here, but I want you to do this differently. And how much of it was, I'm letting everything boil up until the end, and then I'm going to fire you over the phone. And my gut is, again, considering the fact that they fired him over the phone, my gut is there probably wasn't a lot of that. And so what you do is you just keep running through, all these different people that, I think Amy wants us to do this, or I think Amy wants us, that. But I would agree that the big problem is I think we're going to look back on John Robinson and Mike Vrabel, and I think it's going to be Vrabel that gets remembered this way because Vrabel was more popular and Vrabel's kind of the big name, and the coach is always more visible than the GM. But we'll look back on that, and we'll say that might have been her Bum Phillips. And she has talked about this, about when her dad fired Bum Phillips and how she thinks that her father probably in the end regretted that. And let me just say this. When we have all this talk about, Robinson wasn't doing that well. Again, you're not winning right now. Right tackle is not John Robinson's fault. Peter Skoronski is not John Robinson's fault. Will Levis is not John Robinson's fault. These guys that are out there, they're not Mike Vrabel's fault either. So we can keep saying, she was right to do it with the, how have things worked out for her since she's done that? If when she made these decisions and you said, okay, well, here's what's going to happen. You're going to lose, let's say the J-Rob thing where it's like, all right, you're going to fire him and you're going to win 6 games out of the next 20, however many. Are you sure you want to do that? And if when they fired Vrabel, you would say 3 games into next season, you're going to be 0-3, and we're already going to know Will Levis ain't the guy. Would you have reconsidered? Or is this just no, Amy knows, and on you go, and we'll pretend that things are great until Sunday, and then you'll get your ass beat, and then everyone will say, how did that happen? Tyler Boyd just said we had a Super Bowl team. You guys tell me. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. We'll get back into your phones at 615-737-1025. Coming up next, though, there's another. Mike Keith. I got to give it to Mike Keith. He asked a question on the coaches podcast yesterday that I heard, and I was like, woo, Mike Keith. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063. The Game.
pretty impressed by Malik's play. And did you get a chance to talk to him?
Yeah, I saw him right afterwards, and we talked, and I think that obviously they did some things that our defense wasn't 100% prepared for, and that's on him for being able to execute those things and put the ball in play, and like I said, just protect the football. So happy for him.
Malik did things our defense wasn't prepared for on Sunday. That came from Will Levis. So yesterday, Brian Callahan sat down for the Titans podcast with Mike Keith, which I actually like. I kind of think it's ridiculous that the coaches don't take phone calls anymore on these coaches shows, but I get it. Everybody's soft nowadays. But at least now it's got audio we can use because the Titans put it on the podcast. It's the Titans podcast. And so Mike Keith sat down with Brian Callahan, and he asked a question. I got to give Mike Keith credit, Ian, because usually I think those sometimes become very friendly interviews. Like, Coach, I know you lost, but it actually felt like you won. Not saying that's what Mike says, but that's kind of where society is headed. And I don't think he minced words with his thoughts on the defense on Sunday and this question he asked Brian Callahan.
The Titans gave up 7 plays of 20 yards or longer in the game against the Packers. 6 of those were in the first half. What led to the increase in explosive plays by the opposition?
First of all, before we listen to what Brian Callahan said,
nice plays.
First of all, whoa, Ian, that was a smoker from Mike Keith right there.
Maybe so, huh?
Mike, if you're listening right now, and I don't know if you are, but if you are, keep doing that. Tell it like it is, baby. All right, go ahead, play the cut again.
The Titans gave up 7 plays of 20 yards or longer in the game against the Packers. 6 of those were in the first half. What led to the increase in explosive plays by the opposition?
I think they hit a couple of nice plays. I mean, the first play of the game was, they were pretty dialed in to go knocking the run out, and it was a nice run action and they had a guy slide out the back door, and just good play. We weren't assigned fully right. Obviously, that's how explosives get given up. But and then they hit a one-on-one ball down the sideline. Roger on Watson, and he won that battle, which happens sometimes. But the ones that are the hard ones are the third and long explosives that get first downs, where you essentially have a team off the field and they gain a first down on an explosive play when it's 3rd and 15. Those are the ones that are kind of critical and killer, and that's where I was. Explosive plays happen, but those ones in particular were just tough to stomach when we're trying to climb back in the game.
I can think back to a 3rd and 14 Green Bay hit in the first half where I see it's 3rd and 14 and I see Malik in the gun and I'm like, okay, here comes something stupid Malik might do, or they're going to sack Malik or something. And Malik slides out of the way and fires a ball to a wide open receiver. And I turned and I just looked at it. I said, 3rd and 14. 3rd and 14 to Malik. And then when Mike Keith puts it in perspective by saying 6 plays in the first half of over 20 yards. Holy crap. Which takes me to Denard Wilson. Because yesterday, Brian Callahan was getting a lot of blame, and he deserves a lot of blame. You call timeout like that, go for it on 4th down. I mean, I don't. You calling the plays or the fans calling the plays? Will Levis getting a lot of flack because he sucks right now. The owner on this show getting a lot of flack, and I think she deserves it. I think big picture, she's a problem. But everybody around here just decided that Denard Wilson was some sort of superstar coach. I remember when this started, and you hired Brian Callahan, and I was like, okay, who can they go get for the defensive side of the ball? They can be one of these guys, probably been a head coach before, but if not, this long-term defensive coordinator who's got a track record of running great defenses that an offensive coach who calls the plays can just farm that side of the ball out to. Sean McVay got the job. He hired Wade Phillips. He just farmed out the defense to Wade Phillips. That's what McVay does. He farmed out the ball to Brandon Staley. He farmed out the ball to Raheem Morris. He just farms out the defense. Kyle Shanahan, basically same way. Just farm out the defense. And I like it. That's what the guru coaches do. Matt LaFleur, they just hired the head coach at Boston College to be their defensive coordinator. He just farms out the defense. So the Titans hired Denard Wilson. And when the Titans hired Denard Wilson, a lot of people were like, yeah! And I was like, let's see. I'm nervous about rookie coordinators on the defensive side of the ball, given that even Jim Schwartz struggled his first year as a rookie defensive coordinator. Chuck Cecil was terrible and Shane Bowen was terrible. That might just be because they're terrible. But that first year, Jim Schwartz, who's not terrible, was terrible. But I said, let's see. But again, like in training camp, when the offense stunk, Brian Callahan got up there and said, hey, Denard's defense, that's the problem. And everybody in town just ran with it. It's like, oh, Denard Wilson, he's so great. If he's so great, then the Ravens or the Eagles, the teams that people say, he was with the Eagles and he was so good, and he was with the Ravens and he was so good. If he was so great, the Ravens or the Eagles would have hired him to be the defensive coordinator. Because when he was the secondary coach in Philadelphia, Jonathan Gannon was the defensive coordinator. Jonathan Gannon got hired to be the head coach in Arizona, and they didn't make Denard the defensive coordinator. And last year with the Ravens, Mike McDonald was the defensive coordinator. He got hired by the Seahawks. So if Denard Wilson was so good, then why didn't John Harbaugh and the Ravens, a very well-run organization, why did they not make Denard Wilson the defensive coordinator? So here's what I'm going to say about Denard Wilson. I'm not going to say Denard Wilson is bad. I'm not going to say that. Like, I'm not going to say he's a bad defensive coordinator just based off of one game. I thought his game plan on Sunday was terrible. The fact that they didn't have a spy on Malik, are you kidding me? Seriously? I thought his defensive game plan on Sunday was atrocious. And I'm sick and tired of hearing how good the defense is when they don't force any turnovers. But here's what I'll say about Denard. Let's let him earn his reputation as a great defensive coordinator before we just anoint him a great defensive coordinator. And let's not kid ourselves. This happened. This whole Denard Wilson is some great defensive coach. This happened because people want to make up a narrative and then they hope it comes true. I mean, if you had looked at Denard Wilson and said, hey, by the way, Malik Willis is going to come in here and have the game of his life, not sure you'd feel that this is going to be a great coach. So what I'll say is strike one. And let's see if Denard can actually prove that he's a good defensive coordinator. Because Sunday was, quite frankly, atrocious from the defensive side of the ball. And for me, it starts with the defensive coaching staff. Because, again, if you can't put a spy on Malik, if you don't, what are we doing? 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. So go ahead and add that in there. I did see somebody in the YouTube chat said, whoa. I remember you being on the Denard Wilson bandwagon saying he'll be a head coach one day. First of all, I said he sounds like a head coach, which is different. And I will tell you right now, there is a big difference between being a good head coach and a good defensive coordinator. And some guys are made to be head coaches. And Denard Wilson's got a personality I really like. That doesn't mean he's going to be a good defensive coordinator. You know who's got a good personality to be a head coach? I think is probably a pretty terrible defensive coordinator. Mike Vrabel. But right now, Denard's the defensive coordinator. And I need to see a capable and competent defense. And I didn't see that on Sunday. Allowing 3rd and 14s to Malik. Again, as Mike Keith said, 6 plays over 20 yards in the first half. How does that happen? 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones, and we'll continue on here on the program. Let's talk about FanDuel Sportsbook. Thursday night football is a-coming. And you can start with a big win on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and my official sportsbook app. If you're new to FanDuel, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. They've got so many different bets you can make. It's a big one. It's the Cowboys and the Giants on Thursday night football. Just visit FanDuel.com/JGM to make every moment more this season. That's FanDuel.com/JGM for FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 21 and over in President, Tennessee. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issue is non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
In talking to various guys about the different issues, and it's even different position groups, do your job keeps coming up, but now the word accountability is starting to as well. As the head coach, like, how do you make sure that these guys can better hold each other accountable, and how are you going to hold them accountable?
Well, I think we always we hold accountable every day. I mean, that's our job, to be able to correct and coach and teach, and then again, we're trying not to repeat mistakes. And look, I think our guys hold each other accountable. I don't see that as an issue. And sometimes when you're losing games the way we've lost, those are just things that come up, and there's got to be something that has to be different. And that's ultimately starts with me, and whatever that looks like, whether it's accountability, whether it's coaching, whether it's position coaches, whatever it is, it's something that we got to find. We got to find some answers to, because it's not gone the way we thought.
I like Brian Callahan. But when I hear Brian Callahan say things like, no, I think this team, I think they're holding guys accountable, and then I see the same mistakes week after week, it makes it hard for me to believe that this team is as accountable as they make it out to be. And I really kind of point the finger at the coach, not saying like, oh no, the coach, you're lying about accountability. Or again, my thing is, what are the expectations around here? Jeffrey Simmons gets a penalty and it costs you 7 points. And then all of a sudden he blames the refs. Will Levis throws a pick 6. And instead of getting on the quarterback, he says, well, Jair Alexander's an all-pro corner, and so he made that play, so we can't be upset about it. I'm like, so then why isn't your all-pro corner going out there and making those plays? Somebody help me. So that kind of bothers me a little bit. We'll see how accountable they are if the mistakes continue. And if they don't get corrected, we'll see what accountability looks like, because the old saying is you are either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And I do think that we are now past the point of where it's just, well, what's he supposed to do? No. If the quarterback keeps turning the ball over, you're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. If PT continues to stink with bad technique, you're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. If Peter Skoronski continues to be one of the worst offensive linemen in the NFL, and again, this comes from the coach who said yesterday he thinks Skoronski's doing a good job at left guard. Well, Pro Football Focus says in terms of pass protection, he's the 15th worst offensive lineman in the NFL. So that's not a good sign either. So when it comes to accountability, I'm sure you can say everybody's accountable. Every team says we're going to be accountable. Show me. Show me the accountability. One texter says, what are you talking about, Jared? Our defense has played lights out until last week. Define lights out. See, I never believed that the defense was an elite, carry the team, top of the league defense, even when they ranked number 1 through the first 2 weeks, because they weren't causing any turnovers. And not only were they not causing any turnovers, they weren't even getting close to causing any turnovers in the first 2 weeks. But again, let's analyze the 3 games so far. The first game, the defense was great. Did not allow a touchdown. If it wasn't for the Will Levis flick and the blocked punt, you win. So I can give you that. Defense played well. But if you notice that Caleb Williams has stunk in the other 2 games he's played as well. So let's keep that in mind. The second game against the Jets, statistically, defense was fine, but they didn't force a turnover. They didn't come close to forcing a turnover. And when the game was on the line in the fourth quarter, the Jets converted a 2nd and 21 where Aaron Rodgers just popped the ball right over your all-pro corner's head, and Garrett Wilson made a play on it. So you were good enough in week number 2, but you weren't good enough to win the game because you didn't get any turnovers and you couldn't stop Aaron when it really mattered. And then last week was truly an unmitigated disaster. They ran for 5.1 yards a rush. They threw the ball all up and down the field with Malik at quarterback. Malik. So when you're saying like, hold on, Jared, our defense is legit. I'll take the defense that gets turnovers. And again, I mean, yeah, they were good against Caleb Williams. They weren't good enough against Aaron Rodgers. And then they were just plumb awful last week against the Packers. So this idea of, the whole, they were good before Malik. Yeah, well, you were bad with Malik. One texter says, 3rd and 17, the Titans should bring the house, especially since the corners are so good. I agree. I think they got spooked early in the game. I think their game plan was put the corners, match them up one-on-one on the outside, stop the run, and they threw the ball on the outside to Christian Watkins, who went up over Roger McCreary. That was a message-sending play by the Packers. When they threw that ball up on McCreary, the message was sent, which was, if you do this, if you lock your corners man for man on our guys and try to clog up the box and stop the run, we're just going to throw the ball in the shortest guy. And I think the Titans got a little spooked by all of that, and I get it. Because once they've told you that's what they're going to do, they're capable of doing it the entire game. Joe Burrow came in here in 2022, and he threw the ball to T. Higgins up in the corner of the end zone twice, right on Roger McCreary. and there was nothing Roger McCreary could do. It wasn't like Burrow threw a perfect ball, but he knew he had the matchup, and T. Higgins has about, I'm going to say Tiggins, but T. Higgins has about, a foot on McCreary. So it's really not that difficult of a matchup for him to be able to go up there and win. One texter says, hey, Jared, how do you feel about the Titans signing Chris Hubbard to play right tackle? He beat out PT before and is available on the 49ers practice squad. So I will say that when the 49ers let go of Hubbard and the Titans didn't go after him, I was concerned. Because I knew that PT is not very good, but more importantly, I knew that Jalen Duncan couldn't be the swing tackle. Again, my question is, what are you trying to sign Chris Hubbard for? Are you trying to sign Chris Hubbard so that you can win the Dolphins game on Monday night? Or what? Because, again, my point is, if you're going to do that, then if you want to win the next game, you need to start Mason Rudolph at quarterback. But I wouldn't do that. So it's like, if you're going to tank, you might as well let Duncan out there and let him stink it up and let them all and all that stuff, and go ahead and let them do that. So make of that what you will. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And I'm not saying this, but a lot of people are going to say this. And it is what The Athletic is calling the current surprise of the Titans season. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063. The Game. Let me tell all the fine folks out there that tune in to the Chase and Big Joe show tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 11 for your chance to win all-inclusive tickets in the Eurostone Club to WWE Friday Night SmackDown at Bridgestone Arena on Friday, October 4th. Contest presented by Green Trees, a family-owned cannabis company and dispensary providing high-quality legal THC products. Check them out online at greentreescompany.com. And this week's Nashville's Best Deal is Premier Six Theater at 810 Northwest Broad Street in Murfreesboro. Whether you're a fan of timeless classics or can't wait for the newest releases, Premier Six Theater has something for everyone. Go to thegamenashville.com/deals and get half off a $50 gift card while supplies last. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So I pulled up my Athletic this morning, which, by the way, I don't even know why I still subscribe to The Athletic. When I started subscribing to The Athletic, they had a writer who covered the Predators, they had a beat writer who covered the Titans, and they had a columnist in Joe who covered both of them. Now, they don't have a beat writer who covers the Titans. They don't have a beat writer who covers the Predators. And Joe doesn't even write columns about the Titans anymore or the Predators. Joe's a national college football analyst or whatever the hell it is now. So I don't even know why I still subscribe, though I do like the stuff from the Hockey Insiders they have. And I like some of the Mike Sando stuff. But make of that what you will. I guess it's a habit now. I have The Athletic. So I go to The Athletic and I see their power rankings are out. And I'm like, oh, I got to click this. And I was shocked when I clicked The Athletic power rankings.
Shocked in what way?
The Titans aren't the worst team in the league.
Okay. How about that? We got one.
Number 31 of the Tennessee Titans. Jacksonville checks in at number 32. So at least the Titans have that going for them. They're not 32nd. They're 31st. But apparently they wrote at the bottom what the surprise for each team so far throughout the year is. And The Athletic, they write, has the surprise for the 2024 season for the Titans being that they still fired Mike Vrabel. Surprise. It's still that they fired Mike Vrabel, The Athletic writes. Quote, soundly beaten Sunday by the quarterback they had as a third stringer and traded away in the offseason, Tennessee turned the team over this season to first-year head coach Brian Callahan and second-year quarterback Will Levis, who has thrown 4 touchdown passes to the Titans this year and 2 to their opponent. His EPA per dropbacks at minus 3.1 ranks 33rd in the league. Vrabel might not have fixed the quarterback problem, but he probably would have won a game. So there we go. This is only the first in the beginning. And let me say, I advocated for the firing of Mike Vrabel. And I think it's in the best interest of everybody, especially if they were going to try to develop a young quarterback one way or another. Regardless of who, it's Levis or they draft somebody or if they something. I'd rather it be Brian Callahan, an offensive coach who comes from the McVay tree. I'd rather it be Brian Callahan than it be Mike Vrabel. But the more the Titans lose, the more and more and more you're going to hear this. The more the Titans lose, the more the banging on the Titans, especially outside of Nashville, but I think even inside of Nashville, we're going to hear, hey, Mike Vrabel was never 0-3. Mike Vrabel would have found a way to win that game. Mike Vrabel, as The Athletic writes, would have won a game. And maybe to Brian Callahan, that's all just background noise and chatter and the things that we don't allow into the building, and I don't have a thought on it because I don't even think about it. You know how coaches say that kind of stuff? But again, the more the Titans lose, the more people are going to say, they shouldn't have fired Vrabel. The more the Titans lose, the more it's going to look like Mike Vrabel wasn't the problem. And the more the Titans lose, the more Amy is going to hear about they shouldn't have fired Mike Vrabel. And if there's anything that we've learned about Amy Adams Strunk, in my opinion, that we've learned recently, is that Amy hears the outside noise. When The Athletic, the same people report that, Amy didn't like the Mike Vrabel comments in Foxborough, that told me, Amy heard the chatter. In fact, I think that's probably why Vrabel got so mad at me, was because we brought it up on the show about, and I remember Ian, I was like, should I be mad about this? Am I overreacting about being mad about this? Like, what are we, here in a, again, she hears the noise. And at this point with Amy, I don't know if she can be able to ignore it, if that makes any sense. like, I know that a lot of people, like if we were to sit down and say, okay, here's our master plan and it may get worse before it gets better. Can you ignore people being upset? Can you ignore the booing? The Arizona Cardinals basically tanked last year. They didn't go out and get a real quarterback. Kyler Murray was going to be hurt for most of the year. They knew they were going to be awful. It's why they cut DeAndre after the draft, because they knew we're not going to be very good. We don't want to pay DeAndre Hopkins $19 million. So Arizona lost, and Arizona lost some more. And then they got Kyler back, and they won a game against the Eagles, which was nice, but for the most part, they lost. And everybody was okay with it. Because, again, that was the plan. The plan was to lose, and everybody had signed off on it, so that's okay. That wasn't the plan here. I can promise you, just reading between the lines of the things they said, when Amy Adams Strunk fired Mike Vrabel, she told Mike Keith she had high expectations for this football team, and she wanted these fans to know that she wasn't going to stop until those high expectations were met. Going 0-8 is not meeting those high expectations. And the more they lose, the more it's going to be, well, Mike Vrabel wouldn't have done that. And it may be true. It may not be true. I don't know. But the reality is Mike Vrabel was a solid coach while he was here. Again, I think it was time for him to go at the end. I'm not going to be one of these people that's going to say, how dare you fire Mike Vrabel? I'm not that guy. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that the more people like The Athletic, the more people on ESPN, more people around the country are going to say, I can't believe they fired Vrabel. I can't believe they fired Vrabel, and they hired this guy, and the quarterback sucks, and they can't even beat the quarterback they just got rid of. And I don't know if that's going to enrage Amy to the point of doing something stupid or not. But I do know it's reality. I do know what happens around here. And I do know that just because that was the plan today doesn't mean that's going to be her plan tomorrow. Because going into last year, I think there was a sense that, hey, we hope to be able to compete with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill, but we also might not be very good. But we're going to try to build this as a group, and we're going to collaborate, and we're going to all these things, and she fired him anyway. So to me, when I see The Athletic already saying the big surprise of the season is that they fired Mike Vrabel, because Mike Vrabel would have won one of these games, I think, oh boy, this is only the beginning. And I've said this about Ryan Tannehill, and I believe it about Mike Vrabel too. The way we will remember Mike Vrabel and the way we will remember Ryan Tannehill will all be based upon how their successors perform. I guarantee you in Kansas City, they're not sitting there saying, boy, I tell you, Alex Smith was a solid quarterback for us. They're like, thank God we moved on from Alex Smith. But the original plan for Andy Reid was to draft Paxton Lynch. And had they drafted Paxton Lynch and had Paxton Lynch busted the way he did in his career in Denver, had that been what had happened as far as the next quarterback in Kansas City is concerned, they would be saying, and we had Alex Smith and moved on to this guy. So if Levis continues to suck and the Titans can't find a quarterback, we'll sit back and say, God, I mean, Ryan Tannehill wasn't the best, but boy, he won a lot of games around here. It's going to be the same for Mike Vrabel. If Amy goes crazy and if this team continues to lose, and if it doesn't feel like there's an end in sight, and right now I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the Titans fixing this organization, more and more people are going to say, you fired Mike Vrabel for that? And the more and more people that say that, the louder it gets, the more the owner's likely to do something about it, because it's obvious she hears the noise. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And speaking about Mike Vrabel, I think there may be a spot for him in the league that not a lot of people are talking about, And I don't know how you guys are going to feel about it. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company. 615-737-1025, 1025, 1063. The Game.
Jacksonville, on the other hand, Lewis, I just want to know how this football team in late September is able to dig their heels in and stop what this is, because this is a mess right now. What do they do?
Yeah, this is their moment of truth. It was the moment of truth before this game. But now you know what you need? You need the football character to come to the top, to rise to the top. The football character in their best players. This is something that's held true ever since football's been being played. Your best players have to exhibit the most amount of character right now to say, we've had enough. Talent, I don't think, is the problem on this football team. They have some deficiencies that they're going to have to address in the offseason, but they have too many good players who are not able to lock in for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and even out their performances to where they don't have embarrassing moments like this.
That was Louis Riddick last night on SportsCenter after the Jags got absolutely housed by the Buffalo Bills. And again, they've got the Jags at the Athletic as the 32nd team in the league. You're 31st. That makes you feel any better. So again, in Jacksonville, the fix there is obvious. They're going to fire the coach. They just gave the quarterback $275 million. We had Tony Khan on. His dad owns the team. We had Tony Khan on right after they signed Lawrence to the deal. And Tony was like, we're more than happy to pay Trevor Lawrence that kind of money because we think Trevor Lawrence is that good. Well, they don't fall out of love with a quarterback that quickly. So immediately, if you sign a quarterback to a big contract and the quarterback or the team doesn't play very well, the coach is always getting the boot. It happened in Los Angeles last year with the Chargers, and I think it was the right decision. But again, once they gave Herbert that money, I mean, it was never going to be Herbert that got the boot before Brandon Staley. So the fix in Jacksonville is going to be to fire the coach, and it's ultimately going to happen. And I wouldn't rule out Mike Vrabel to Jacksonville. And here's why I wouldn't rule out Mike Vrabel to Jacksonville. It takes two to tango when it comes to hiring a head coach. It takes the team and it takes the coach. I mean, if Vrabel's going to interview for the Carolina job, my thoughts are he'll take any job, which is kind of crazy because, you know, if I was Mike and I had been run out of town, and again, I think it was the right decision, but let's put ourselves in Vrabel's shoes. Vrabel probably thinks he got a raw deal here. And so if I'm Vrabel, the last thing I want is to go to a bad situation with a bad owner because I feel like I just left a bad situation with a bad owner. So I want to go to a good situation with a good owner. And Jacksonville, but Carolina definitely thumbs down. But again, if Vrabel's going to interview for the Carolina job, that means he's probably going to interview for any job. And I think Jacksonville probably has respect for Vrabel because Vrabel beat them. So it's like, hey, we've had to face Mike Vrabel. Now let's get Mike Vrabel on our side. That being said, I actually don't think Jacksonville would be a great place for Vrabel to go to because while I think the immediate problem that gets fixed is the coach, I think there has to be a question if you're Jacksonville in your head of whether or not Trevor Lawrence is the guy or not. And see, the market correction is coming for quarterbacks. And I don't want to sit there and say, I told you so with what I'm about to say. But Ian, how many times did I say, if I'm the Dolphins, I'm not paying Tua? Because, and my reasoning was, because I don't think he's that much better than Sam Darnold, and I can go get Sam Darnold for $15 million, $20 million, whereas Tua's going to want $50 million. I said, if I were the Dolphins, I would go with $30 million a year max for Tua. And Tua's people would be offended. And I'd say, okay, you can do that or not. I'm going to go sign Sam Darnold. So if you do that, I'll go get Sam Darnold and I'm not going to worry about it. And everybody called me stupid.
Yeah, you were out on the Tua contract.
I mean, I think it was a Jared versus Joe where Joe almost laughed off the phone because I said I thought Sam Darnold was better than Tua. We're 3 weeks into the season, and I don't hear too many people laughing about that one now, do I? And I like Sam Darnold. I don't love Sam Darnold. I like him. But a Sam Darnold can be had every year. I really don't think there's much of a difference between Sam Darnold and Jared Goff and Ryan Tannehill and Joe, of all people, I think asks the great question when he says, over the last 2 years, if you had flopped Tannehill and Goff, so you would put Ryan Tannehill behind that offensive line with those running backs, with that offensive coordinator, with that tight end, how good would Tannehill be and how good would Goff have been here for the last 2 years? And I said, I think Ryan Tannehill would be the one making $53 million a year. And so I think there's a lot of guys like that. The problem is, I do think that there were a lot of people who thought Trevor Lawrence was better than that. When it comes to the Darnolds and the Cousins and the Tannehills and the Goffs there were a lot of people that thought Lawrence was going to be better than that or that Lawrence was better than that. I never thought that. I thought when they signed him, I said, why didn't you wait? Like, why didn't you wait? And they, it was like, no, Jacksonville's smart. They got out in front of this. But right now, Lawrence, when he signed that contract, he was a mid-level quarterback. He was a mid-level quarterback that maybe had the potential to be a high-end quarterback, but I had never seen that. I didn't even see that when Jacksonville made their revival in 2022. I mean, they played the Titans, and Josh Dobbs, I thought, played a better game than Trevor Lawrence. So I'm not sure there's a lot of upside when it comes to Lawrence. So if I was Vrabel, that wouldn't be the job that I would want. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on the program. One texter says, you got Sam Darnold right, but your Bengals Super Bowl pick is not looking that great. Did I have the Bengals in the Super Bowl, Ian?
I don't know about that. I'll have to double check, see if I can tell.
I had the Texans playing somebody in the AFC title. I think I had the Texans in the Super Bowl. I think I had Detroit, the Texans. And I don't even know. I mean, I guess they're doing okay. But I'm not sure I picked the Bengals. Also, Josh Allen, MVP. Think that's looking pretty good as well. One texter says, how many quarterbacks are being paid millions of dollars to have 0 wins or 1 win on the season? The quarterback market is overinflated because only a handful can win the Super Bowl. So this is where I think, again, the quarterback market is going to change. And I think the fact that Tua and Lawrence signed in the same offseason, I think that kind of highlighted it. Where I think the quarterback market is going to change is I think you're really only going to pay the guy going forward. Like Dak might be the last guy. Like Dak might be at the very bottom of the list of guys that are going to set records for contracts because life without this quarterback is going to be so painful. But Kirk Cousins signed a record contract to come to the Vikings. And when he left the Vikings, he signed a good contract in Atlanta. But Minnesota just signed Sam Darnold for $10 million, and they're getting the same or better results than they would have gotten with Kirk Cousins. And teams are going to start realizing that. Teams are going to realize, 4 or 5 years in on a quarterback, I'm not sure if I know what I have. I'm not just going to plop down $1 gazillion just because I drafted the guy high. If that had been the case, you would have signed Marcus and would have had to pay the price for it. Tampa would have signed Jameis Winston and wouldn't have won a Super Bowl for it. So I would just say that I think that's kind of the next step here with these teams are, no. If we've got an elite quarterback, if we've got Herbert, if we've got Lamar, if we've got Stroud, if we've got Burrow, if we've got Mahomes, if we've got that guy, we'll pay him. But we are not going out of our way to give a massive $55, $56, $58 million a year contract to a quarterback who might be the 16th best quarterback in the league. Not when I can just go get Sam Darnold. And even though Sam Darnold is this year's version of last year's Baker Mayfield, there's going to be a guy like that every year. There's going to be a guy you can go get who, if you've got good play around the quarterback, can win you some games. Right now, you can go get Ryan Tannehill. And I would argue we all know that if you want to go get Ryan Tannehill, you can win some games if you've got a team decent enough to put around Ryan Tannehill. 615-737-1025. Trevor Matich joins us next. His reaction to the 0-3 start, the disastrous performance on Sunday, the rock bottom with Malik Willis. What Trevor has to say, we'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025, 1025, 106 The Game. Stillman and Company, let's give something away. I'm in a good mood. Be caller number 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you'll win a pair of tickets to see 21 Pilots at Bridgestone Arena on October 9th. Good luck there. Okay, it was a disaster on Sunday. Not only was the Titans' offense terrible, 8 sacks. Will Levis turned the ball over 3 times, including a pick 6 in the first half that gave the Packers a 17-7 lead, but they got smoked at home to Malik Willis. Woof. Trevor Matich joins us now on the program, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, let's start there. How bad is it that the Titans gave up on Malik Willis 3 weeks ago, trading him for a 7th-round draft pick, which is essentially a bag of footballs, for Malik to come in and play the way he did at Green Bay? How discouraging is that?
It's incredibly discouraging, and I don't know that the Titans should have kept him, but the way he played in that game, it sure makes fans think that they should have, because he did everything the Packers asked him to do. The Packers' offensive brain trust did a great job of taking advantage of what the Titans' defense was doing. And Malik did a great job of protecting the ball and not trying to do too much. You put all that together with his ability to run, and it looks like he's a world beater at quarterback. Now, he's not yet, but it sure looked that way against this particular Titans game on that particular day.
Trevor, how bad was Will Levis to you, and how much of it is Will Levis's fault? And then I think Malik kind of gives us an opportunity to say, okay, how much of this is what's around Will Levis and his coaching and all of that that's at fault here?
Levis, I am incredibly disappointed in. Just incredibly disappointed. And the reason is the same that we talked about last week, the decisions that he makes. He shows promise with some of his throws. He shows promise with his ability to avoid sacks just because he's so strong. He can break out of the pocket sometimes where other quarterbacks wouldn't. He's certainly physically and mentally tough, but then he makes crazy, awful decisions. The pick 6 against the Bears wasn't a bad throw. It was a horrible decision to try to flip the ball out to the left sideline when there were defenders around his receiver there. It was just a terrible choice. So the team would look at that. Let's put it this way. I would look at that and think, okay, he better not do that again. That's one of those mistakes that you don't repeat. And so he goes ahead and throws another pick 6 this last game against the Packers. And it wasn't a terrible flip, but it was an astonishingly awful choice to throw the ball to a receiver that was standing there kind of on the right sideline waiting for the ball to come with a defender standing behind him and to the inside. It's like he threw the ball against air without regard to what the defense might have been doing. And that also is a choice. You know what? Check the defender before you throw that ball. And after a while, as a member of the team, I would be looking at this thinking, okay, I get it if you have a young quarterback. I get it if that young quarterback has growing pains. But this guy is doing stupid stuff that is getting us behind in games and ultimately making it so that it's extraordinarily hard to win. And so right now, and you and I talked about this last week, Jared, can he continue to make choices like this all season long? Well, he was 2 for 2. He had that pick 6 against the Bears. He had that terrible, awful attempted lateral against the Jets when they were in scoring position that turned into a fumble that the Jets recovered. Well, that's 2 for 2. And now he's got this pick 6 here. And okay, he's 3 for 3. So is he going to do it again next week?
Yeah, I think the one question mark I would have as far as Levis is concerned is if they wanted to win the Miami game, Trevor, I would say you're better off with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. But I'm not sure I see any upside to having Mason Rudolph at quarterback. I look at it with Levis like, hey, if they keep playing him, he keeps turning the ball over, they're going to lose a bunch of games, but at least they're going to be picking first or second. If they go to Rudolph, they're going to win 6 or 7 games, not make the playoffs, and be picking 8th or 9th. So I guess what I'm saying is at this point, I'm okay with leaving Levis out there because it is kind of like an indirect form of tanking. And is it crazy to be thinking about that 3 weeks into the season?
Yeah, I think it is, because just purely mathematically, they're only 2 games out of first place with 14 to go. So it's not like the season's lost. It's not. This team is a lot better than it has shown. It has lost 3 games in a row largely because they've made extraordinarily ridiculous mistakes. And that includes on the defense, for example. A lot of Malik Willis's big runs were on scrambles where the pass rush got out of their lane. So you had a massive gap open up in the pass rush lanes, and Willis just said, okay, I'm out of here, boom. And off he went, and he picks up a big chunk play. And that happened a bunch of times to him. So, this team is better. It's potentially a lot better than what it has shown so far. But I think when it comes to Willis in particular, Levis in particular, you've got to decide if he has shown enough that he is a guy you want to ride with and develop, because young quarterbacks are going to make mistakes. They're going to have problems. But if you can see the potential, and if you can see them moving past mistakes and not repeating them all the time, then you live with that. And that's one thing that the players in the locker room will see too. Quarterback is a different position that they'll look at him and go, okay, well, he's young, but we see that he's going to get better. I mean, the ultimate examples of that are Peyton Manning and Troy Aikman. I think they were both like 1-15, weren't they? Their rookie year.
Certainly, Manning was 3-13, and I think Aikman was terrible. And Aikman, even his second year, was not very good.
But you could see the potential there, and so you stayed with them, and so that's why you do that. The team around them understand that, but that doesn't account for dumb decisions. That just accounts for growing pains. And right now, I think that the Titans would have to ask themselves the hard question that is this: have we seen from Will Levis that he has the stuff to become our franchise quarterback, and therefore we should put up with him causing us or greatly contributing to us to lose games? And it's not all his fault, certainly not all his fault, but he has had a big hand in these losses. And if you say, well, listen, we don't know yet. Okay, well, if you don't know yet, then you owe it to the other players in that locker room. You owe it to the fans to try to win games as best you can. And I think you and I talked about this before also, Jared. I think that Mason Rudolph, the backup quarterback, if you had to win a game today, would be the quarterback that you would want to play. I actually think he's better than a lot of people give him credit for. Obviously, I don't know more than the coaches know. They see him every day. But he did have a really good season last year when he came in for the Steelers. And he showed that he could do a lot of stuff. I really liked him in college. And if he can win games now, then they owe it to the team to win games now, because they're not out of the playoff race by any stretch. And this team is a whole lot better on both sides of the ball than it was last year from a standpoint of talent. They just have to quit hitting themselves in the teeth with a hammer, making mistakes that cause them to lose games.
Do they really owe it to the team to try to win games right now? I mean, I totally agree with you that I believe that right now, if my house depended upon the Titans beating the Dolphins on Monday night, I'd want Mason Rudolph to play quarterback. But again, congratulations. Mason Rudolph played quarterback this year. You won 6 games. You went 6-11. Now you have the 9th pick. Woo! I don't get excited about that, Trev. And I just don't see the upside for the organization to playing Rudolph, where the upside with Levis is either Levis figures these problems out and becomes an NFL quarterback, great, or you're going to be picking first because you're the worst team in the league right now.
Yeah, see, that second part, I can't imagine them thinking that. But the fans think that. I think it's legitimate to bring up. But ultimately, this isn't a league where you rebuild by sacrificing games now, with the exception of for a young quarterback. And that's where you've got to ask yourself, has Levis shown enough that he can be that guy? And the thing is, when he's good, he's really inspiring. And when he's bad, he is a horrific, flaming train wreck. And always keep this in mind, I mean, from a fan standpoint that are listening to this now, that it is fundamental that more NFL football games are lost than they are won. Meaning that mistakes cost you a game more than big plays win you a game. It's like those blocked punts. Even without the scoop and score for a touchdown, which we've seen here for this team this year, when you have a punt blocked, the statistical odds of you losing that game are through the roof.
I think Rich Gannon said it's 90%. If you get a punt blocked, you're going to lose.
Right. And so that is not just because of what happens on that drive. Again, if it's just a block punt and it's recovered right there, well, the offense gets a short field. Okay, that doesn't seem to be a disaster. But the reason it's outsized and its impact is the effect it has on morale and momentum on both sides. Same thing with a pick six. It's not just the points. It's the impact on morale, momentum, and belief in your quarterback if it keeps happening. And I'll keep this in mind, too, that the average margin of victory in NFL games is like 3 points.
Yeah.
And so you give up 7 points on a pick six and then do it again twice in 3 weeks. And then you have a couple of punts blocked and one of those returned for a touchdown. Does this mean that your team is horrible? Not because of that. Those are mistakes to be cleaned up that are very difficult, make it very difficult to win when you make them. The problem is this team is making them in bushels. And so they've got to clean that up first before we have any idea how good they can be.
Trevor Matich is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. The Titans have already made one move on the offensive line. Nicholas Petit-Frere is out. Jalen Duncan is in. What are your thoughts on that move, and what are your thoughts on the offensive line's struggles as a whole? 8 sacks on Sunday against the Packers.
I never thought coming into this season that I would see such a horrific performance by this offensive line this season against anybody. I mean, it was putrid, just putrid. And even the best players, J.C. Latham at left tackle and Lloyd Cushenberry at center, they had their share of getting beat pretty badly. And that adds, you add that to the fact that you had, left guard, right guard, and especially right tackle just melt down at times. And it's hard to function. Again, that goes to Will Levis's, credit that it's not all his fault. But at the same time, he knows that he's got this problem and he needs to operate within that problem and know where his answers are. And so when things break down from the right side, he needs to know right now, what am I going to do? Right. And, when you break down the actual players, right tackle is the one I'm sure that you've been, I don't know if you had your blood pressure checked, but I'm guessing that yesterday you were semi-ballistic. And Nicholas Petit-Frere, I no longer believe that he can be an adequate player. I thought that having had 2 seasons where one he was thrown in before he was ready because of injury, another he was suspended for the first 6 games, and then he came in and got hurt because he wasn't physically ready. I thought this would be the year where he would have to prove himself. You would see the very best he would have. And he got pushed around like crazy. Now, it's one thing to be soft, and he played incredibly soft. I mean, you could have put a feather against him and walked him back into the quarterback at any time you wanted. That wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what he was doing with his hands, Jared. When you take a pass set, you need to have your hands up like a boxer ready to punch. Now, when you do that, the defender is going to try to slap your hands down. And as a right tackle, you need to understand that's coming, and you need to have counters for that and get your hands reset and back on it. What he did over and over again to avoid that hand slap was he would take his pass set. This is Nicholas Petit-Frere now, right tackle. He would take his pass set with his feet and have his arms down by his sides so the defender couldn't slap them down. He put them there himself, fearing that the defender would put them there. And then when he brought him up to punch, it was easy for the defender just to keep him down. And that's one of the reasons that he kept on getting beat around the corner, because he didn't have his punching ability up and ready to go. And I'll guarantee you that Coach Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach, doesn't teach that. He doesn't teach that. When I had that happen to me and I'm playing tackle, you'd be like a sewing machine. If I played against a guy that was a master at slapping down hands, I'd punch him with one hand, he'd slap it down. I'd punch him with the other, he'd slap it down. I'd punch him with the other, all the while sliding my feet to stay in front of him. And then 2.5 seconds later, the ball's out. right? Carry your hands at your sides. And Nicholas Petit-Frere, this is his third year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had his hands at his sides over and over again while his guy either walked him back into the quarterback or came around the corner because he just kept him from bringing his outside arm up to deploy as a punching weapon. It was just, I watched that over and over again, and all he had to do this year was be adequate. Just don't get beat immediately. And he could hold up the position. And he proved that he's not capable of that.
Trevor, quickly, what's wrong with Skoronski?
I think things are happening too fast for him inside. In college, he was a left tackle. There's a lot of space. Things happen slower. You move into guard, things happen super fast. And you see him get off of his balance plane or off of his power set easily when he gets hit really hard from an angle that he's not quite expecting, and then he has to recover, and by then it's too late.
Trevor Matich is with us on the program. Coming up next, I'm going to ask Trevor, because I haven't done the scouting. I haven't. Trevor, I hate to say it, it's 3 weeks into the year. I got to ask you about the college quarterback class that's coming out in the draft this upcoming year. And then UT's win. I mean, what UT did on defense against Oklahoma, I want Trevor's thoughts on that. What does it mean for the Vols? We'll do all that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Let's talk about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. That's right. I love them. You've heard me talk about Hiller and how it feels like being part of a family. Well, this month, Hiller is treating you like family with their Friends and Family Savings event. Happy Hiller Club members like me save up to 25% off your first HVAC, plumbing, and electrical repair. And everyone else gets a 10% discount. Present your coupon and save by visiting happyhiller.com today to download a coupon. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today. Stillman and Company, we're joined by Trevor Matich at ESPN, who is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics when experience matters. So, Trev, I know, winners don't like talking about tanking. I get it, but we are where we are as far as the Titans and the season's concerned. So I have to ask this question. I could stomach tanking if I knew there was a prospect that was as ballied about. I didn't like Caleb Williams, with all the extra stuff, but he was a high-end prospect. Andrew Luck, high-end prospect. Trevor Lawrence, high-end prospect. Peyton Manning. If there was a guy like that, I could say, okay, suck it up and tank here. Is this quarterback class between Carson Beck and Shedeur Sanders, and I don't want anything to do with Shedeur because I don't want the Deion circus to show up into town, but Beck, Shedeur, Quinn Ewers, Cam Ward, are any of these guys, in your opinion, high-end, franchise-changing quarterbacks to get excited about?
I think Cam Ward, who's at Miami now, Hurricanes, is one of those guys. I mean, he makes difficult passes and plays look easy. He's got that calm demeanor. In a lot of ways, he's like Jaden Daniels, who was at LSU, won the Heisman, and now is with the Commanders, and is showing a lot of poise and a lot of calmness in his first 3 starts with the Commanders. So Cam Ward's like that. Quinn Ewers of Texas would be like that, but he hasn't been healthy. Every year he seems to get hurt. Carson Beck, I like. He would be a guy that I think you could trust in that capacity as much as you can anybody else drafting a quarterback. Alabama's Jalen Milroe. If he continues to improve as a passer and not just a deep thrower, he's a guy that can cause all kinds of problems as well. Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, is a guy that is not in an NFL-style system, but he does have an NFL-caliber arm and size and demeanor. So he's a guy that bears, looking at maybe in the first round. And then, not in the first round necessarily, Drew Aller of Penn State has struggled there, but that's a school that traditionally has not developed quarterbacks very well, even when they've been talented. And then Utah with Cam Rising, Cam Rising. If he can stay healthy, he's another guy that you could bring in not in the first round. Brady Cook at Missouri. There's a lot of guys that are out there that you'd have to evaluate. You'd have to decide how high you'd want to take them, but that have the apparent ability to step into the NFL and develop into very good starting quarterbacks.
Trevor Matich is with us. Trevor, I thought UT's win on Saturday was fantastic. I thought that they went into Norman. They managed the crowd, the big first SEC game at Norman, Oklahoma. I thought UT played a very complimentary, complete ball game. I think their defense is legit, and I think they're bringing the young quarterback along. But I also think this was a test game. I think that, in order to convince me that you could take on Alabama and Georgia and Texas and the rest of the SEC, you had to get past a team in Oklahoma that probably wasn't an elite team. Trevor, I think they passed the test. How much of their victory on Saturday was proof that Tennessee's legit, and how much of it was Oklahoma probably needs to get a little bit better on the offensive side of the ball?
There were things that I saw from Tennessee that give me a lot of confidence that they are legit. And to win in the SEC, you've got to be strong at the line of scrimmage, and Tennessee is strong on both sides of the line. Their offensive line had a couple of injuries they had to deal with, and they still did what they needed to do against a very good Oklahoma defense. The Tennessee defense, Oklahoma's O-line is a work in progress, but they just completely shut them down. I mean, the top 2 rushers for Oklahoma were Oklahoma's backup quarterback and a wide receiver who had 2 carries. That's their top 2 rushers. And then they got the quarterback, Jackson Arnold, bench for the back leading rusher, averaging 1.8 yards per carry. So, the Tennessee defense, especially at the line of scrimmage, has been as good as advertised. But you mentioned complimentary, Jared, and that's important because this game showed how balanced these guys are and how they can win in different ways. To have young Nico Iamaleava at quarterback go into Norman in that environment against a truly outstanding and aggressive Oklahoma defense that is coached by Brett Venables, who knows how to mess with young quarterbacks, it would have been risky to play a regular offensive game plan. But the fact that the defense did so well and held Oklahoma to just 3 points until midway through the fourth quarter allowed the offense to keep investing in pounding the ball. They ended up running the ball about 50 times. It's not that they had a lot of rushing yardage out of that, but they ran well enough that they could continue to hand it off. And then they only had to throw it 21 times. Now, among those, plays that Nico was out trying to make a play, he fumbled it twice, lost both fumbles. But he wasn't exposed very often because the defense kept the score down, which allowed the running game to continue to be the feature. That is ultimate complementary football. And I think Nico will be better going forward from having played as much as he did in that environment at Oklahoma.
Okay, give me the top 5 teams in the SEC in order according to Trevor Matich.
All right, so the top 5 teams in the SEC, I think, right now I'd say Texas is number 1.
Agreed.
I'd say Georgia number 2. I think Alabama's number 3 because they're more experienced at quarterback. I'd put Tennessee at number 4. And at number 5, I'd put Ole Miss. I still want to see them do what they're doing against a little bit better competition. But when you talk about those 5, I think you could jumble them up and throw them down like a bunch of Yahtzee dice and bring them up in any order you want. Because Ole Miss probably is better than 5, but who are you gonna put them ahead of at this point of the season based on the schedules?
I just say based on defense, I put Tennessee ahead of Alabama. That's just me. We will see Alabama this week against Georgia to see how they match up. And I will say, Trevor, I was not impressed by Georgia against Kentucky. And I know that, hey, they got the job done. They went on the road to Lexington, did what they're supposed to do. But I really do think, to your point, we're splitting hairs here. And that game against Kentucky did not impress me with Georgia.
And that's fair. That's fair. Although that usually happens in 2020 when they went there. They scored 16 points, which is the lowest in a road victory that they've had under Kirby Smart. Then in 22, when they went there, they scored 14, which was the lowest in a road victory under Kirby Smart. And this one, they scored 13. So they tend to struggle there. And I watched the tape on that. I'm doing a breakdown for SportsCenter and, pregame shows and stuff like that on what happened to Georgia's offense in that game. Some of it was that Kentucky played really well on defense, and they got some studs there on that defensive front. But there were other things that Georgia did on offense that are absolutely correctable, and they better correct them against Alabama.
Trevor Matich, presented by Houston Clinics Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, great stuff. Look forward to this every week. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jared.
Yeah, Trevor Matich joining us on the program. Coming up next, Blake Bedingfield, the scout who convinced the Titans to draft Derrick Henry. He was the director of college scouting. Go read Joe's article, The Athletic. He's the one that convinced him to draft Derrick Henry. He writes for Paul Kawarski's website, paulkawarski.com. He basically lays out why the Titans are bad. And boy, did I enjoy reading this. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So about a month ago, was it about a month ago? Maybe a little bit over a month ago, maybe about 6 weeks ago. I can't remember. Time flies when you're having fun. But I was in Toronto at a wedding. And the wedding was being held at the Canadian Royal Yacht Club, the great George R. Gooderham. We celebrated in front of the old oily paintings of these old Commodores from back in the day. But there were a lot of people from Nashville that were there because the couple that was getting married was a couple from Nashville. And I'd had people come up to me and say, that they listen to the show or that they, but the small talk thing's always hey, Jared, what do you think about the Titans this year? And again, this was about 5-6 weeks ago, something like that. And this one guy came up to me at the wedding and he's like, how good do you think the Titans are going to be? And I told him, what we had said on the show about the expectation of 5 wins. And I said maybe somewhere around 7 and 10. Mm-hmm. And this guy could not accept it. He's like, but we're better than we were last year. I was like, based on what? Well, look at the free agents we went and added, Jared. Come on. We're better than we were last year. And I was like, you can keep saying it. It's not going to change my opinion. Like, I hear what you're saying, but the schedule is tougher. And, there's
new head coach. Going to take a minute. Yeah.
My big thing was you don't get better by losing Derrick Henry as much as people – but then, Derek, he wasn't the same anymore, but it wasn't. I said, okay. And I, as I have learned to do in my older years, I just smile and nod. You guys know how that works. So Blake Bedingfield at paulkaharski.com pretty much lays out the reason why the Titans are bad. Now, he says it's the assumptions that were made. But again, these are the assumptions that led to them being bad. And again, this is Blake Bedingfield at paulkaharski.com. And he writes, quote, going into the season, I believe too many assumptions were made about this team. Now, let's go, Ian. Let's go with these assumptions. Again, this is the guy who was the director of college scouting that convinced the Titans to draft Derrick Henry, so he's got credibility. I think it's the best thing Paul has at his website is when Blake Bedingfield breaks down these games. So he goes into the assumptions that were made about this team. He says, I believe too many assumptions were made about this team. Number one, Bill Callahan was an offensive line coaching magician and could turn the youngest offensive line in the NFL into a well-functioning group into the first month. Ian, what did we think about that throughout the course of the offseason?
Big coach.
We kept saying, I kept saying they don't have a right tackle, and you guys kept saying, Bill Callahan will fix it. And how many times did I say, you guys are acting like this man is Jesus. Like he's a good line coach. But you can't take bad players and say, all right, coach him up. It's not an accident. Phil Jackson won with Kobe and Michael. Trust me, he wasn't going to win. If he had stayed around for that 1999 season with the Bulls, he would not have won with a team led by Tony Kukoc. I can tell you that right now. But everybody kept telling me, Bill Callahan will fix it. And I said, okay. Number two, Brian Callahan could be a quality play caller and head coach without ever having done either job before. How many people were like, hey, we've got a much better coach now than Mike Vrabel? And I'm like, I hope. Number three, Will Levis could somehow develop instincts and feel for the game despite not showing those qualities in college or in his first dozen NFL games. Ian, how many times have I talked about the interception that Will Levis threw last year in the Oiler jerseys against the JV Texans, where DeAndre Hopkins and Trayon Burks were in the same area, and both Texan defenders went with Hopkins, and he tried to fit the ball in there to Hopkins instead of waiting the extra second and throwing the ball down the field to a wide-open Burks. And I kept saying during the offseason, whether or not Levis becomes a good NFL quarterback will depend on next year, if the game slows down, when he's got more experience, Will he be able to process that faster, or will he be able to understand, hey, he's got time to make a decision here and then make the right decision? And I kept saying it. And I kept getting pushback. People kept saying, no, Jared. He'll learn year 2. I mean, the game will slow down. Better coaching. There's a slam dunk that this was all going to work out. I'm like, I mean, I hope, but Number 4. Boy, Ian, I think we've talked about this one. Jeffrey Simmons would be a dominant pass rusher like Chris Jones despite not showing that type of dominance weekly.
Yeah, we brought that up a little.
I think we talked about Big Jeff. He'll show him. I'm like, can Big Jeff get to 10 sacks and then we can talk about it? That Frazier, God bless him. I love him with all my heart. But Frazier said that he thought Simmons with Aaron Donald's retirement was the best DT in the league. I was like, guffaw. Like, what? But again, everybody wants to believe it, so they say things like that, and then all of a sudden you get there on a Sunday, and it's like, when does Jeff plan on sacking the quarterback? Which, by the way, Ian, he did get a sack on Sunday.
Yeah, he did.
Malik scrambled for -1 yard. He got credited with a sack. Way to go, Jeff. So not only does Jeff get credit for the sacks that he doesn't get because he creates them for everybody else, according to you all, but he also gets credit for sacks that aren't actually sacks. Way to go. Number 5, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears could replace the dominance and focus of the defense like Derrick Henry demanded. I believe this program was the program that talked at length about how, look, I understand. Snead, Awuzie, Murray, Cushenberry, Pollard, Ridley. I got it. But you don't get better by replacing Derrick Henry. Oh, no, Jared, it was time, and it was maybe. But again, you don't get better by getting rid of the guy who's the best player on the team. But I guess, again, we're so much better, Jared. Yes, you have some more players this year, but you don't have Derrick Henry. And Ian, who was the other guy that I said the Titans were going to miss a lot and was going to be an issue outside of Derrick Henry?
I'm blanking.
Number 6, Arden Key could replace Danico Autry's production.
Yes, Danico.
How many times did I bring up that's 11.5 sacks that just walked out the front door and went to Houston? You guys know how many times I brought that up. By the way, T'Vondre Sweat, and I like T'Vondre Sweat. I do. Not on pace for 11.5 sacks. So, I mean, we can talk about it all we want about how this metric guy, this says this is better, and this guy's better, and this one. Do you want to know why you're not getting turnovers? Because you're not forcing the quarterback into bad decisions by pressuring him the way you did with Danico. And I know Danico's suspended. I got it. But that doesn't mean that his 11.5 sacks all of a sudden aren't gone anymore. And number 7, Trayon Burks would finally be a consistent producer. I remember in training camp, Trayon Burks had a couple of good days. Derek's like, they got to draw up plays to get him the ball. I'm like, no, they don't. And I remember when DeAndre got hurt, and it was like, all right, time for Burks to step up. And I said, hold up. I said, I don't have a problem with giving Burks the first crack at it. But if he doesn't produce, because I'm not convinced he will produce, because, again, I made those assumptions last year. I'm not making them again. If he doesn't produce, I want NWI out there because I at least know NWI will catch the ball, which, again, is better than Trayon Burks because Trayon Burks doesn't catch the ball anymore. But all offseason, I was told, no. Brian Callahan, he's a better coach than Vrabel. You'll see. I'm like, I hope, but I don't know that. Bill Callahan will fix the line. That's great. But if we give Bill Callahan better players, then imagine what he could do with the line. No, Jared. We don't need to hear the right tackle story. So again, Blake Bedingfield, the guy with credibility. He is the one that convinced the Titans to draft Derrick Henry. He's watched the tape. He's been there. He's done these things. He's saying, you guys spent all offseason convincing yourself that Bill Callahan could fix the offensive line when, again, you're giving him PT. You guys thought that Levis, he'll develop the instincts. I mean, again, I hope. You guys thought Jeffrey Simmons you'll watch, Big Jeff, he'll take off. He hasn't so far. In fact, Jeffrey Simmons has hurt the team this year more than he's helped the team. Again, talking about replacing Derrick Henry and Nico Autry, and then, oh no, it'll be fine. And then Trayon Burks would finally be a consistent producer, and we know that is now not the case. Here's what the message is. And I think you guys are gonna get on board with this, because you guys have gotten on board with dismissing the salary cap, which makes conversations about adding players a lot more fun, because instead of talking about what are we going to do about the cap, fans are just like, yeah, screw it. I mean, the cap doesn't matter. And it doesn't. So I think now, the Titans won't use cap space as an excuse with us anymore, because they know that you're smart enough now. But you guys were about a year behind me on figuring all of that out. I think you guys were about a year behind me on this one, which is, it's great to hope for the best case scenario. Like, it's great to say, well, you know what? What if this guy we drafted in the 4th round that showed a little bit of promise, what if he becomes like a legitimate big-time player? It'd be great. Like, it was great when Cortland Finnegan became a number 1 corner. But we need to not assume that. And this offseason, the Titans and you made a lot of assumptions about a lot of things that there wasn't really any evidence for, other than just the idea of hoping that it would come true. And again, I am not above this, because I did this last year. Because when the Titans moved Aaron Brewer from left guard to center and paid him $4.5 million, even though I was still against it, they said, it's different playing center than guard. I said, okay. When they signed Andre Dillard, who was a bust in Philadelphia, but hey, he's got 1st-round talent. We vetted him. We think he can be I said, okay. I said, I'll give it a chance. When they put Arden Key in there and they let guys like DeMarcus Walker go to Chicago and Mario Edwards Jr. go to Seattle and things like that, I said, okay, let's see. When Vrabel said, well, Arden Key's really, really good, that's why Dillard's stinking it up. I said, okay, let's see. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to go into this year and just think that things that I haven't seen were going to happen. And I think that's why a lot of people got their hopes up this year. And the Titans did nothing to dissuade people of those hopes. And part of me thinks that's probably because of the coach's inexperience. The coach probably thought, I can fix it, when it's not that simple. Everybody thinks they can host a radio show and be number 1. And let me say this, as somebody who has accomplished that in their life, it's a lot harder than you think. And it takes a lot more time than you think. And I think that's what happened to Brian Callahan. And then his optimism wore off on all of you. And now it's like, what the hell? And that, I think, is a real problem that the Titans are dealing with now. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. You want to weigh in on that? And then there's one other thing that I got a message for Brian Callahan. It's time to give it up. Just give it up. Let it go. Forget about it. Move on. Stop wasting your time on this. And I don't think he's going to do it. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
said last week that before this game, that Traylon was one of the best graded receivers in the room. He had 1 catch for 2 yards. I think. Now he's got 2 catches for 11 yards. What's it take to be a highly graded receiver if you could do that little at your main job and rank that low?
There's a lot of things that go into that. There's the blocking component, there's the route component. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, he does his assignments, but he hasn't made any plays on the ball yet. And that's their job. So yeah, as far as doing his job and what's asked of him in every play, yeah, that's part of it. He's done that well. But when the balls come to him, we haven't made enough plays. And that's for the offense as a whole. That's not just Traylon. We haven't made enough plays on offense to score more than 17 points.
Guy that's getting looked to on a deep double as opposed to Calvin, who you guys paid a bunch of money for and that you've talked about being the
Sure. Yeah, that's a fair question. And sometimes you can't control where the ball goes. But yeah, there's times when the ball went up to Trey that he's got to go make a play on it. And then there's times where you like to see the ball go to Calvin. And that's just the nature of playing receiver and playing quarterback and calling plays, is all those things happen sometimes.
Let me just say this. Brian Callahan said there's a time where you want the ball to go to Trey and there's a time you want the ball to go to Calvin. No, there's a time you want the ball to go to Trey, because I don't want the ball to go to Trayon Burks at all. And I got a message for Brian Callahan here. Cut out the Trayon Burks bullcrap. Enough is enough. And I just don't understand why this coaching staff has such an inability to realize that this guy absolutely stinks. And they just keep putting him out there and they keep throwing him the ball and they keep every game. It's like, well, we got to make sure we get our quota in of throws to Burks. He's awful. Like if I was made head coach today, we'd be deactivating him on Monday night at Miami. He's useless to me. He cannot catch. And so I'm trying to figure out what is up with Brian Callahan's inability to realize that Trayon Burks sucks. At this point, I wouldn't even be upset if they cut him. He's like one of those guys. I love the Atlanta Braves, and Brian Thicker's the manager, and there's some guys in the bullpen that if you put on this team, he's going to pitch him. So the only way you can keep him from pitching some of these guys that stink in the bullpen is to not have him on the team. And I feel like that's where we are with Trayon Burks. The only way to get him to get Levis not to throw him the ball, to get them not to put him out there on snaps, for him to not play a vital role in helping get you beat, is for him to not even be on the team. And I am so sick and tired of watching Burks, and I am sick and tired of talking about Burks. Everybody's always like, can you imagine if Trayon puts it together? No, I can't at this point. I think I've seen enough. Again, here are the problems with Trayon Burks. Number one, he can't catch, which I think is probably not a good sign for a receiver. Number two, he can run, but he can't really run. Like, he was a 4.55, AJ was a 4.49. The difference is that allows you to get past people where 4.55 is not blazing speed. They send him deep sometimes, but when has he ever beat a guy deep and then run with the ball into the end zone? He's not Chris Sanders. So he can't really run that well, as much as they'll say, well, the GPS tracker said, GPS track my ass. I mean, I am sick and tired of watching Trayon Burks try to run. Number three, even when he's in the best shape he's ever been in, he's still always kind of a little chubby. Like, if you notice the body type that he has compared to DeAndre or Ridley or NWI or really anybody else, remember what the scout said after he got drafted in the Athletic? Burks was 2 biscuits shy of being a flexed out tight end. Even when he's in the best shape of his life, he still can't catch. He's still really not that fast, and he's still always a little chubby. And finally, he can't take any hits without getting hurt. At what point does the coach realize he ain't got it? And instead, I don't know how many snaps he played on Sunday, but I'm sure it was enough. Like, I'm sure it was 28 snaps or something like that. Like, I mean, just what has to happen for Brian Callahan to give up on Trayon Burks? He stinks. And it's okay, by the way, to admit that he stinks. It's okay to say, you know what? We're going to deactivate Burks. Why would you do that? Well, he doesn't really give us anything on offense. He's not a special teams player. And, well, we know he doesn't play defense. So when he doesn't play special teams and he doesn't give us anything on offense, we just figure let's go with somebody else. And again, I don't think NWI is like the best player in the world or anything like that. But at least I know when the ball's thrown in NWI's direction, he's going to catch it. And so if I felt like there was any sort of indication that Brian Callahan was getting the message being that you can keep trying on Trayon Burks, but it ain't going to change. You're not going to get results. Then I would be okay with saying, hey, Callahan's smart dude. He's going to figure it out. And, this is enough. And then you move on. And instead, I feel like they keep doubling down on it. Like, no. The reason why Trayon isn't playing well is because we're not getting him the ball enough. We need to get him the ball more. No, you don't. The Titans need to look at their offense like a basketball team. And they need to say, okay, if we're going to take 50 shots today, who do I want shooting the ball? I want Ridley touching the ball. I want Pollard touching the ball. I want Hopkins touching the ball. I want Boyd touching the ball. I want Spears touching the ball. And I'll give you Wiley because I think Wiley can be, kind of like a below average tight end, but he can be okay. That's who I want touching the ball. I don't want Burks touching the ball because he doesn't do anything with it when he does. He doesn't even catch it. So enough.
Burks had 26 snaps, and Westbrook-Akine had 13 this past week on offense.
What are we doing? I don't even remember the 13 snaps NWI. I don't even remember NWI being in the game on offense. I'm not doubting that.
Yeah, I'm just going by the snap chart here. But
I mean, what were the totals for all the wide receivers, offensive snaps?
Let's see. Offensive snaps. Ridley had 39, which was 72%. Boyd had 38, which was 70%. Burks had 26, which was 48%. Hopkins had 25, which was 46%. Westbrook-Akine had 13, 24%.
I don't need Burks playing half the game. I don't need him playing. I don't want him playing at the game at all.
Chig had 30, which was 56%. Wiley 25, 46%. And then Vanette had 15, 28%.
I do love the fact that, the assistant coaches, I think, have to speak once a month. And so I'm guessing they spoke last week. In fact, I know they did because that's when Bill Callahan talked. And Tyke Tolbert clearly, when just trying to defend his guy Burks, Tyke Tolbert clearly said that, because Paul's running with it, that he was the highest graded receiver. And so, of course, Kaharski, is asking Brian Callahan, like, how is he the highest graded receiver when the guy's got one catch for 2 yards? And I know, again, without even having been in the room, I guarantee you Callahan was sitting there being like, why did Tyke say that? Like, why say that? Now you just make us look stupid. But it is true. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. Add that to the list. We're back to your phones next. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 through the game.
I don't think we took a step back. I think that, they hit a couple of plays and we continue to give the ball away at a rate that's not sustainable, and put ourselves in a really tough spot. And that's ultimately where the NFL games are won and lost. We need to do a better job of taking care of the football and trying to get it back, is really the biggest reason that we've lost. And we put a stat up today that of our turnovers, and, I think 7 turnovers and 2 block punts. So it's ultimately 9. We're -9 right now. If you count the block punts, they don't count officially as a turnover, but in my mind they do. And we've given up 14 points off interceptions, 7 points off of a block punt, and then 2 fumbles in plus territory that led directly to field goals. So that's 6 more points. And I think we ended up with our point differential being at 30 points. We lost by 7 twice, and we lost by 16. And then we've also given up 30 points on turnovers. And so when you look
30 points,
there's that's it. And that's encouraging and discouraging all at the same time.
I do wonder how Floyd would feel about all these turnovers. I mean, I know he would hate them, but like, would he say, it's a rookie mistake, or, they got to figure it out, or would he be, Ian, there's a part of me that thinks that he might be sitting here screaming, they got to put the quarterback on the bench if he's going to turn the ball over.
I don't know. It probably at this point, we used to do the segment, Floyd's 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
I believe turnovers would probably be number 1 on the 3 things at this point.
So when we used to do the pregame show, we used to have like a Floyd's keys to the game, and his keys were always turnovers. He's like, it was number 1 key, turnovers.
Well, not always, not every week, but I have a feeling now it might be number 1 on the list at this point.
Well, on the pregame show, his keys was always turnovers. Turnovers and penalties.
And then punt blocks in this situation. So turnovers and special teams, I think, are at the top of the list right now.
I heard somebody say, not going to say who, somebody that I would say is kind of new to the game, but should know better, made a comment a couple weeks ago, maybe last week, I can't remember, but made a comment that was basically like, I don't really get worked up about the turnovers because I think turnovers are a luck stat. And I was like, when it comes to being good on the radio, it's really about whether or not you're interesting more than it is about whether or not you're right. If you keep trying to shoot for the right take all the time, which again, I just have an opinion and I don't make things up, but I understand, what people like is the interesting stuff. So, that's why we talk so much about quarterback, for instance, because it's important and it's interesting. But when if I was a program director and I heard somebody say, I don't think turnovers are that big of a deal, I think turnovers are more of a luck stat, I'd be like, okay, I thought I hired somebody that knows something about football. Turnovers are not a luck stat, especially when Levis keeps turning the ball over. Randy texts in. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. Randy says, you hear about the game slowing down for quarterbacks. Do you believe we are in the process of waiting for or hoping for the game to slow down for Will Levis? And how many games should be a minimum to see if it's indeed starting to slow down for him? I'd say this. There are kind of 2 schools of thought here. I think we can all agree that year 1, when you're a rookie, it's like, man, just go out there and try not to get killed. Year 2, when it's time to say, hey, let's see if you know what it's like to be a pro. Let's see if you know what it's like to play the game. We got to see a little jump. But I think there are 2 schools of thought here as to what defines year 2. Some people, like DeAndre Hopkins, say, well, he hadn't even played 16 or 17 games. I'm not that kind of person. For me, and I'm not saying that quarterbacks should play turnover free. I get very, very, very mad when I hear people say things like, well, Peyton Manning threw interceptions or Dan Marino threw interceptions. It reminds me of how Floyd used to say Mariota didn't have the luxury of throwing interceptions. And when I would say things like, well, Mahomes throws interceptions or Brady throws interceptions, his response would be, and Brady can get it back. Levis threw a pick 6 in the second quarter on Sunday. And when they ran that ball in there, it might have been the first quarter, honestly, but he threw a pick 6 in the first half. And when they ran that ball in there at 17-7, I knew Levis wasn't getting it back. So don't give me he throws interceptions. My problem is he throws an interception a week. Every week he's throwing interceptions. And again, he can't make up for it. He can't go out there like Phillip Rivers in his prime and throw for 425 yards.
They can't
If
even
you're
score
gonna
20
throw for
points.
425. Exactly. If you're going to throw for 425 yards in a game, you're going to throw some interceptions. But these are just like pitching and catching, and they take it back for a touchdown. So my answer to your question about the game slowing down for Levis, it should be happening now, and it's not. And that is a problem. You know, I'm a big Anthony Richardson supporter. I have not seen this past week, but supposedly the stats are terrible for Richardson. I saw the Green Bay game. I thought Indy gave him a horrendous game plan, and I think that Richardson's footwork is an issue, and they got to really drill down the mechanics and things like that. I feel like the Colts have probably done their best to ruin the young quarterback. But even though Richardson played 4 games last year before getting hurt, and even though he's only 22, and even though he only started 1 year in college, it's time for Anthony Richardson to be figuring some of these things out. Again, if you make it as a quarterback, you get $275 million. Well, at some point, you have to earn those no matter what the circumstances are. So, again, I was hoping that the game would be slowing down for Levis now, and it's not. And that disappoints me. Mike says, I would ride with Levis, and if we end up with the first overall pick, so be it. I would trade it since there isn't a legit top quarterback to receive a load of other picks to re-up the team in the next year's draft and in future drafts. I think the biggest problem, John Robinson, the worst decision he made as general manager of the Titans, and people will disagree with me on this, I think it was to not trade that Corey Davis pick. Again, I didn't like Corey Davis, so when they drafted him, I was watching, we were doing the draft show, and I was like, oh, no, you know, as I normally do. But I felt like, you know, that Rams trade was so beneficial that if they could have just traded down one more time and gotten more picks for it, and God, it could have been like one of these ever-growing tree branches, that Rams trade, and it just keeps getting spun and more players and more Pro Bowlers and more, and they use the pick on Corey Davis. If you get the first pick in this year's draft and not one of these guys has established themselves, you know, even at the level of a Jaden Daniels or a Drake May. So if I had the number 1 pick, let's say this season continues the way it is, Levis sucks, he's Zach Mettenberger 2.0, and the Titans end up 2-15, and you're picking first. If any of these guys are the level of Jaden Daniels or Drake May, I'd take them. If they're not, and this is the 2022 class or something like that, fine, go ahead and trade the pick. But that doesn't really solve the biggest problem, which is who's going to be the quarterback. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, who's out there? Now you're looking at Sam Darnold and Cousins and all those kind of guys, which is what you were hoping to get away from when you drafted the young quarterback, because you're hoping that the young quarterback could be your franchise guy, which would be better than what Tannehill was. So instead, what you'd be doing is you'd be, okay, we're going to trade the number 1 pick, and then we're going to go sign a guy and hope he can be Tannehill. Is that exciting? Not sure it's exciting for me. One texter said, I looked at all the power rankings today. Does Brian Callahan realize the Titans are listed at number 32 or 31 with Jacksonville being the other team fighting for last place? I mean, again, Brian Callahan would tell you, you know, coaches love to do this, and I can't knock them for it, but they love to get up there and they love to take accountability and basically say, like, you know, we're not a very good football team right now, and I've got to do a better job coaching them. And then they kind of go on from there. Brian Callahan got up there after they lost on Sunday and said that this team's not very good right now, and they're an 0-3 football team, and he's an 0-3 head coach. And then it starts with him, and he hadn't done a good enough job. I think Brian Callahan knows this team sucks. And I think Brian Callahan knows it's his job to either get this team to stop sucking right now or to suck it up, be terrible, and get his young quarterback. One thing that I've noticed with Brian Callahan a lot, and I don't have a problem with it, so don't interpret this as if it's a problem. But one thing that I think I have noticed is he references Cincinnati a lot. I remember when I was at Louisville, got a graduate student who had played at Vanderbilt. Her name was Liz. I love Liz with all my heart. But when Liz first showed up, she kept saying, well, at Vandy, what we did, and at Vandy, what we did, and at Vandy, what we did. And there were a couple of people that were like, I'm so tired of hearing that. And I was like, just let it go. It'll be fine. We all know somebody like that. Well, when I was there, and what we did there was what we all have that guy. Callahan does that a lot with Cincinnati. Well, do you remember the first year that Zach Taylor was the coach in Cincinnati? They were the worst team in the league. And so maybe he looks at this and says, like, yeah, when we got to Cincinnati, we were terrible. And that's what I'm shooting for here. I'm hoping to be terrible, and I'm hoping to go get Joe Burrow. I don't think so, but I also wouldn't rule it out either. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Let's just get right back to the phones next. We will do that here on the program, here on Stillman & Company. Let's talk about Twice Daily. At Twice Daily, they've got a burger built for you. Try their new classic jalapeno ranch or Titans burger. They're all made to order, so you can fix them the way you like them with your choice of cheese, veggies, and other tasty toppings. And if you're looking for a burger deal, Twice Daily has that too. Get their $6 meal deal, including any made-to-order burger, potato wedges, and your choice of a 20-ounce Coke or Pepsi product. There's no better way to get more meal for your money than with Twice Daily. Twice Daily. What are you craving?
It's a tough time. I didn't been around it, so I mean, me coming in, I didn't feel any type of stress or doubt that we still can't get the job done. Because if you look in the conference, you got 2 wins with Texans and Colts got a 1 win, and I mean it's still winnable. We're not in week 10, week 11, 12. Where it's time to put this time. Like you got to go. Like all of us, no guy has played a perfect game. The offense hasn't played perfect yet. And once we start to get that feel and just have that confidence, man, I don't really know what it is yet. That's why we got to continue to watch the tape and get better every day. But we have a legit team. Like this is a Super Bowl caliber team on paper. But at the end of the day, we got to go out there and prove that.
That was Tyler Boyd saying, hey, we got a Super Bowl team on paper. Okay. Reminds me of something Belichick said years ago. I actually, when he said it, I thought about this. And because Kaharski's the one that tweeted out that Tyler Boyd said that yesterday. And I meant to pull this up and I didn't. But I have it highlighted, in a book about the Patriots that was written. I think it's Better to Be Feared, the Seth Wickersham book. So Belichick apparently, went crazy because there was a player who said something like, oh yeah, we have the best receiving core in the league or something like that. And all of a sudden Belichick was like, I don't talk. Here it is. Found it. In camp, safety Brandon Merriweather, a rookie first-round pick out of Miami, lined up over Wes Welker. He told the Boston Herald it was an honor to cover one of the best slot receivers in the league. An innocuous compliment. But in a team meeting the next morning, Bill Belichick read the quote aloud and said, Brandon Merriweather thinks Wes Welker is one of the best slot receivers in the league. How the blank would Brandon Merriweather know? You don't know anything, so shut the blank up. And I loved it because it reminds me of how does Tyler Boyd know who's a Super Bowl team and who's not? Let's go to Steve, who's been hanging on patiently and is up next on the program. Steve, thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hey, Jared, man, this is a great show as always. And I'm going to be honest. Hey, you told them before the season started what could happen, and it happened. And we're getting bonehead plays from the quarterback position. And I'm like, okay, we could lose to get the number one pick. I don't trust that they could pick a number one quarterback and he coming here, he going to do the same thing. And I'm like, I want to ask you, what can we do? What can we do? It's over.
This is the
what
hardest
can we
part.
do to get to the next? I mean, at least get a quarterback that don't turn the ball over and stuff.
This is the hardest part. Thank you for your call. This is the hardest part about the situation the Titans are in right now. Because I have seen some red flags from this coaching staff that make me very cautious. And I like Brian Callahan. I don't know if you guys hear me say that enough. I like him, and I think, you got to give him time to see how he develops as a coach. I thought that was a rookie mistake he made on Sunday when he called the timeout and put the offense back out on the field. And, I think Blake Bedingfield wrote at, on Kaharski's site, Blake Bedingfield wrote that it was like, that kind of seems like a rookie head coach that doesn't know if he's an offensive coordinator or if he's a head coach. And I think, those things kind of work themselves out. But at the same time, I've seen some concerning decisions from the way this roster was built that make me wonder, even if you did get the number one pick, are these guys smart enough not to blow it? And I don't think I'm in favor of Amy shaking things up again. Even though I think the personnel guys are all full of it. And, I think they're both kind of just sunshine pumping snake oil salesmen. Both of them. Brinker and Carthon. I hear them both talk, and every time I'm like, that sounds good, but. Like Brinker talks about his AI cancer curing model, and I'm like, question. So how did that lead to signing Aaron Brewer to a $4.5 million contract when you could have just given him the right of first refusal tender at $2.6 million? I mean, it sounds good, but then when I think about the things you guys have done, it doesn't really add up. But again, I don't know, you blow it up again, and then you got a coach working for a GM that didn't hire. You see what I'm saying? Like in Jacksonville, if you're to say, what do we do about our terrible team? The answer is you fire the coach. That's what's going to happen. I don't know that that's going to solve their problems or not, but they're not firing Trevor Lawrence, so they're going to fire the coach, and they're going to get somebody else in there, and you're going to see. But again, the Titans have already pulled that string. So what are you going to do it again? Now look, that being said, the 49ers hired Jim Tomsula and fired him after a year, and hired Chip Kelly and fired him after a year, and then went with Kyle Shanahan. So maybe that is what makes sense. But I've got a team right now with a front office and a coaching staff that didn't think they needed to sign a right tackle, and 3 weeks into the season, they're like, well, I guess we're screwed at right tackle. And that is a huge red flag if you're going to develop a young quarterback. Because I texted a former NFL head coach after Anthony Richardson performed the way he performed at the Combine, and I said, if I were the Colts, I would take him fourth, and I'd either sign Gardner Minshew or I'd bring Matt Ryan back, and I would announce the day that I draft Richardson that Matt Ryan or Gardner Minshew is the starting quarterback. I'd sign Dalton Schultz from the Cowboys and stick him at tight end, and I'd turn around when it's time for Richardson to play, and I'd hand the ball to Jonathan Taylor 25 times a game, and I'd bring him along slowly. Indy's out there throwing the ball 35 times a game. I don't think that's conducive to helping a young quarterback. So, again, I know you're like, well, hey, if they draft a young quarterback, they're probably going to mess that up. And what I've seen of this front office and this coaching staff right now, given, again, how obvious the need at right tackle was, I'm starting to see some of that. It's starting to concern me about where they go from there. That's it for us. We're out of here on the program today. Great show today. Preds Insiders, Adam Vingan. Boy, Ian, I bet Robbie was real sad when Adam Vingan took over Preds Insiders.
Fight to the death.
Adam Vingan hosts Preds Insiders next.